Senate Committee on Business and Commerce come to order. The clerk will call the roll.
Senator Shortner.
Present.
Senator King.
Here.
Senator Birdwell. Senator Campbell.
Present.
Senator Creighton. Senator Johnson. Senator Colkhorst. Senator Menendez. Senator Middleton.
Here.
Senator Nichols. Senator Zaffarini.
There being 7 present, a quorum is established. Good morning, members, and thank you all for being here. Today is an important day. We're going to continue the discussion regarding what we need to do as a legislature, what we need to do as Texas for the future concerns regarding electricity needs. Those are primarily centered around 2 issues: the continued need for advancement in providing for operational flexibility, and then the second is resource adequacy, the number of megawatts we have on our grid to power Texas into the future. This is the bills laying out were some of the priority bills that were discussed in the news conference, but they are a work in progress. I look forward to we all look forward to working with our House counterparts as well as the governor's office to get it right, to do exactly what needs to be done this session, addressing those 2 pertinent issues to really assure the people of Texas that their electricity their lights are going to come on when they flip that switch, and that we have the resources necessary to make continue Texas's economic miracle. Before we lay out the bills, I'll just ask any other members on the committee if they have any comments or would like to discuss anything before we start. Senator King.
Thank you, Chairman. And everybody here has been here for big issues and hard issues, and there's probably very little bigger or more difficult than this. And I was just thinking back, Chairman and I were talking on the phone last night and thinking back over past years, and every time, y'all know how this all comes together. I mean, we meet with industry, we meet with constituents, we meet with regulators, we meet with each other, and then out of all those discussions, you pull concepts together and you put it into a draft bill and then eventually into a committee substitute, and then you formally bring it before the committee to talk, and we ask for your help because we know that those bills all still need, at least almost all those bills still need work, and that's got to be in a very collaborative fashion. I was thinking back over just some of the big things while I've got to be here. When they remember the long distance breakup, AT&T and back in the late 90s, and then SB 7, which is the predecessor to what we're talking about here today, and then telecom, all the things that have come before this committee over the years, and then the House counterpart, and it's always had to be a very, very collaborative process. And I can't speak for anybody else up here, but I think I can speak for everybody else up here in saying we need it to be a collaborative process going forward, because the real solutions are going to come not from just us, but from y'all. And if everybody is not trying to work together and everybody's got their own clients, they have to represent their own shareholders, their industries, and then we have the added structure that we not only have to be attentive to that, but we also have to represent the people of Texas and think about public safety and flow of commerce and all those things, and what Texas looks like 40 years from now. And so I would just ask today that as you testify that please come and help us figure out how to make these better bills. And I particularly speak for my bills, but I got a feeling everybody else feels the same way. And so to the extent you can, try to help us do that, and we'll try to do the best job we can. So, thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Anyone else like to say?
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Zaffarini, then Senator Nichols, and then Senator Campbell.
Thank you, and thank you both for those comments, and I certainly take you at your word, and I look forward to a collaboration that involves all of us, and I'm particularly interested in listening to everyone. I implore all the witnesses to please give us recommendations, because many times we have witnesses who come and they give us information, and they give us their perspective, but without making recommendations. So what I'm hoping we hear today is how we can improve these bills. Not simply a criticism of the bills, but perhaps what they disagree with and how they would recommend that we improve the bills. so that it can be a true collaboration where we can really consider the recommendations that are made to us. And thank you both for the expression of your interest in collaboration. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Nichols?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Oh, come on, Mike. There it is. Yeah, I need one of those ones. I need a Zaffarini one. First of all, thank all of y'all for being here. I know there's a great interest in this. Many of y'all have been to some of these other hearings we've had related to electricity. A lot of you have taken the time to individually come to our different offices, which we greatly appreciate that. But one of the things I heard, and I've heard repeatedly in some of those meetings, is that the market's really okay. It's working. We've got a competitive market. And the answer is, my response to that is, we do not have a competitive market. There are distortions in the market. We all know it, caused by federal subsidies and other types of subsidies. So those cause distortions that prevent the free market system from working. We did lose several hundred Texans in the Uri storm, and we did lose billions of dollars, partly from electricity, but also partly from the storm. And we got real close during the hot summer. So it's not working good enough. And what we've got to do is make it better so that the people of this state don't have to worry about whether they're going to run out when it's hot or it's cold. That industry looking to move here can realize and plan on their electricity not turning off, on and off, but also trying to keep those costs at a fair and reasonable amount. And that's how you blend all this together. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Campbell?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. While the problems that manifested with Uri had multiple causes, and so the fix is not a one and done. So understandably, the answers and what we need to do to keep our grid resilient is a work in progress. And I think that describes it well as to where we are at this time. A work in progress, and no one person has all the answers. And that's why having a collaborative partnership with everybody to come up with the right answers is the right thing to do. And so I appreciate that's what the chair and the vice chair are doing. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Senator. Any comments? Very good. With that, there's also committee substitutes that were emailed out, if y'all were awake this morning. And then there's some actual hard copies in the back of the room for, I think, the majority of the bills. All 6 of mine do. And then, do you have subs on yours? No subs.
Do we
Okay.
have subs? Yes, we do.
Yeah, subs. So, and there will be more subs, I'm sure.
I should know that.
Yes. Senator, I'm going to turn the gavel over to Senator King, and I'm going to ask you to recognize me on Senate Bill 6.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And by the way, everybody knows, all of us, there's other committees meeting, and Mr. Chairman, I'll have to sneak out about 9 o'clock for about a half hour to border to a bill. And somebody else will be
Colbert is here.
nearby. Chair lays out SB 6 and SJR 1 and recognizes the author, Senator Swartner, to explain the bills, but first understand there are committee substitutes, as you just said, to both SB 6 and SJR 1. So Senator Nichols sends up the committee substitutes for SB 6 and SJR 1.
Let's not adopt it, though, since
You want to?
we're probably going to. Yeah, we'll just pull it up because we got another
All right.
set for sure.
All right. Well, Senator Swartner is recognized to explain his SB 6 and SJR 1.
And the sub for SB
And
6,
the
but
sub.
we're just not adopting it.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So again, while reforms from the last legislative session in SB 3 and other bills address many of the concerns of Winter Storm Uri, there remains a need to address 2 issues tied to dispatchable generation. One, of course, again, is operational flexibility in the management of the day-to-day management of the grid. And then the long-term resource adequacy, the sheer amount of electricity Texas needs to power itself into the future. This bill addresses those 2 pertinent needs of Texas by first, it's a 2-part bill, by first establishing the Texas Energy Insurance Program. This program would guarantee 10,000 megawatts of new generation, new steel in the ground, time certain. It would be a true backup, just as individuals buy a generator for their home to back up their electricity when the electricity goes off. This program, with these 10,000 megawatts, would serve as an insurance policy, a backup that Texans can count on, that they would know that it is coming their way, that in times of crisis, it would be there for them. This bill supports and maintains our current dispatchable generation through a state-backed low-cost loan program, ensuring generators in the state can maintain and improve the state's current generation fleet. Specifically, SB 6, again, establishes a Texas Energy Insurance Program outside the competitive market to operate 10,000 megawatts of natural gas plants geographically and strategically dispersed throughout Texas to ensure sufficient power is available during times when customer demand outpaces the power supply. The bill tasks the PUC with developing a competitive RFP process for companies to bid and give the PUC the authority to designate areas in the state with the highest need. The bill stipulates that the program and the assets of the program are last on and first off. These insurance generators will turn on only when our energy reserves fall below 1,000 megawatts to prevent these assets from interfering with our competitive market. The bill requires each plant to maintain at least 7 days' worth of emergency on-site fuel. The bill establishes a performance guarantee that can be drawn upon if a generation asset is unexpectedly unable to perform. The bill also creates a revolving fund within the Comptroller's office that the PUC can use to support needed maintenance and retrofits for existing dispatchable generation resources, not dissimilar to the State Water Implementation Fund of Texas, the SWIFT Fund. The bill requires that the PUC prioritize funds for the most cost-effective projects expected to retain the most dispatchable generation resources. And the bill adds protections around the distribution of loans so that projects receiving funding must demonstrate that the facility will operate for at least 5 years. Further, the program prohibits funds from being utilized for weatherization, paying off of debts, or profits for the company. Members, there's committee substitute, and that substitute was fashioned after extensive feedback from stakeholders, and it is as follows. It changes the timeline to build transmission for the insurance assets from 270 days to be interconnected by the time the insurance asset is ready for testing commercial operation. The substitute also directs the PUC and ERCOT to put transmission projects for these facilities at the top of the transmission queue. The substitute removes provisions from the Energy Insurance Program that were unnecessarily prohibitive for companies that want to bid on the RFP. The substitute limits the ability for an entity to receive stranded cost recovery to only if the legislature counsels the program. The substitute mandates that the energy insurance assets only turn on prior to load shed for the whole state or by region. The substitute stipulates that the loan program is a 0% interest loan rather than having the PUC determine a rate. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'll be happy to answer questions from the committee, and we do have 14 witnesses.
Senator Johnson.
Just real quickly, as a technical matter, you mentioned 270 days. Could you repeat that change from the substitute to the original?
The TDUs were concerned about the tie-in timeframe. It was for initially in the bill at 270 days, but we changed that to be interconnected now we're changing it to by the time the asset is ready for testing or commercial operation.
Okay.
So it has to be concurrent with the building of the plant, essentially.
Thank you.
Senator Colcors. Oh, anybody else?
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Zaffarani.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Schwartner, for your very thorough explanation and for the changes you made in the committee substitute. When you and Senator King first told me about the legislation, my first reaction was, is this re-regulation? And you explained that it was not from your perspective. Could you explain why it is not so that we can all hear that again?
Right. The market, the competitive market, energy-only market would still be functioning, and these assets would not be operational unless the criteria to bring them into function is met during times of significant demand and high heat, low or very low temperatures. So this is an outside the market backup insurance policy that again, addresses, I believe, what many Texans across Texas continue to verbalize, that they are concerned about their electricity turning on in times of significant need. And we have seen that over the last year with times in which we have significant demand increasing. And Texas is going to have 15 million more people over the next 15 years. And we need more generation, and we need to make sure that we have the dispatchable thermal generation to regulate the market and to modulate the grid when necessary. And so this is an out of market backup solution that doesn't impede the daily function of the competitive energy-only market.
So it's your position that if we offer low-interest loans and also grants, that is not either re-regulation or a step toward re-regulation? Because
I will grant that it is certainly assisting, subsidizing the current fleet of dispatchable generation. And in the greater good, I think that is a reasonable tact for the state to consider when we need that dispatchable generation. We have problems with an aging fleet. We have some gas plants that are over 50 years old. And if we can assist in their continued operation while, for instance, the backup fleet is built, but also other aspects of reform are implemented, such as what we'll see in Senate Bill 7. I think that's an extra added benefit and an avenue that should be proceeded with.
Thank you. And I appreciate your analogy about SWIFT, but my concern is that with SWIFT, the applicants don't compete with each other and don't compete for customers. But those who would compete for getting these 10,000 megawatts and being able to offer them would compete with each other and could perhaps, are we picking a loser and then perhaps promoting?
Well, I think the state should drive the best bargain possible. So it is an RFP process, yes, for the insurance program.
Yes, for the insurance.
Regarding the loan program for the continued assistance of the dispatchable generation that's in service right now, that is based upon criteria as well, including the highest likelihood of maintaining that dispatchable generation. There's a whole list of criteria for that loan program.
You don't worry that those criteria would be perceived as the state strings? You know, when we talk about having a Texas grid versus participating in the national grid, we always say we don't want the strings attached by the federal government. You don't worry that the criteria would be perceived as strings attached by the state government?
No, I don't believe so, Senator.
No? Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Members, anyone else? Senator Colcourse.
Yeah, the loan program that you're creating is one that I'm most interested in. I think in the interim where it focused, of course, that was me living in two worlds of state affairs and B&C, and interestingly watching the movement of ESG and the testimony that we had in Marshall in December. And so I just want to compliment you on this as a tool. I think it is a tool of low-interest loans we see in these inflationary periods. I'm old enough to, thankfully I was in college in the 80s, but I remember the 1980s and the high interest rates that really, became it actually was catastrophic with what we saw in the S&L and everything else. But I think it's going to be one of the most important tools. We talk a lot about backstops, but having capital available without huge strings attached in ESG and scoring from some of these largest banks and capital providers could truly give us the ability, these people out here, this is a full room, to have that available capital to be able to build our fleet into the future. So I want to thank you. And again, if I were to file a bill, which I didn't on this, that would have been the first bill and my most, I think what I would have focused on. We have a number of bills today, as Senator Campbell said in her opening remarks. There is not one thing that's going to lead to the solution, but several tools. But I think this is one of the most important. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. I'd just direct the committee regarding the loan program, going to Senator Zaffarini's and your comments on page 23. line 6 is kind of the beginning of the criteria for the applicant for a loan. Again, it's a 0% interest loan. It's designed to maintain the current generation fleet. This is, again, a work in progress. There are ideas of maybe changing these criteria, but those are the criteria currently in the substitute bill.
Members? Great. Well, the chair opens up for public testimony, SB 6 and SJR 1. And let's see. First four up will be Corey Amther, Mike Alvarado, Julie Rathgerber, and Michelle Richmond. And y'all know the drill. When you come, please, when you're called on, please state your name, who you represent, and whether you're testifying on, for, or against the bill and the SJR. And so why don't we start at my left, your right.
Okay. Good morning.
Michelle.
Thank you. Senators Michelle Richmond, Executive Director of the Texas Competitive Power Advocates, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I represent TCPA, which is a trade association of 12 companies that are wholesale generators and power marketers in ERCOT, and we are opposed to Senate Bill 6 and SJR 1. These are a fundamental U-turn away from the competitive electric market. It represents a costly tax on consumers that does not improve reliability or make the market economic for dispatchable resources, the new or the existing. And unfortunately, it sends a clear message that Texas does not believe in the competitive market and will result in state-owned generation system-wide. California has gone down this road over the past 15 years, and generation is not built there without the state building it or a utility contracting for it to be built. So there's no private investment risked. Their bills are approximately 44 cents a kilowatt hour, and they experience rotating outages fairly regularly, while our consumers pay about 1/4 of that amount for electricity. And access to capital is not the problem that we face in building in the ERCOT market. So a 0% loan doesn't address the actual problem, which is that the market itself does not value or pay for reliability. It doesn't value dispatchable resources, but it focuses on the lowest production cost. So if there's not enough revenue to be earned in the market to pay back a loan and cover the maintenance and operations costs, it doesn't really matter what the interest rate is because there may not be enough revenue available to pay back the principal. So, despite what some may tell you about the new entry signals, we have a couple of anomalous years where an imaginary unit that has no outages, no hedging costs, no transportation costs, no fuel
Richmond,
risks.
I'm going to go ahead and ask you to wrap up.
Yes, sir. The bill doesn't increase reliability or fix the market, so new megawatts that are built will ultimately drive existing megawatts out and is therefore not a solution that should be pursued. Unfortunately, with the plants being held out of the market, there's no benefit to the
I'm going to go
consumer.
ahead and ask you to stop, please. Thank you. I'm sorry to cut everybody
No,
off.
absolutely.
We could all talk a long time today.
I'm not sure where I want to begin on this.
Yes.
Can I?
Chairman, please.
You said 2 or 3 times it doesn't improve reliability. And the average individual listening out there, if they hear that we use 70,000 plus megawatts a day typically, and this plan would be new steel in the ground, time certain, 10,000 megawatts of dispatchable thermal generation. And it'd be a hard kind of cognitive calculation as to understand why you would say that. I bet you're about to say because it's going to make others retire, right?
Well, so it's
Why is it not making it more reliable? Why does not having a generator at your home make your electricity supply more reliable?
Well-
Why not having a reliable insurance backup program with 10,000 gigawatts strategically placed with 7 days of on-site fuel storage, latest and greatest technology? not make the Texas grid more reliable?
So what we're talking about is 10,000 megawatts that would be held out of the market. So we would be going through conservation alerts. We would be going through EEA1, EEA2. We would be on the very verge of load shed before those units got turned on. And candidly, what we see is the appetite in this state among Texans and policymakers is that they don't want to wait until we're on the edge. It perpetuates the market of scarcity and crisis-based, electricity. And so because those are held out of the market, it's basically 10,000 megawatts that consumers are paying for on their bills that are going to sit on the sidelines until we're in a crisis. Unless policy.
Let me stop you right there.
Okay.
Consumers, reliability does come at a cost, and the calculations, if the entire cost was borne in the RFP process and socialized across all ratepayers, would be $2 to $3 a month for the average homeowner. So that is one thing that I believe homeowners would say, yes, we have a more reliable grid. I'm willing to pay that. There are ways to diminish that cost if the state were to kick in money directly for the cost of construction, but that's a different issue. The idea of having more money in the system has been addressed to some extent through the changes in the ORDC curve, through various ancillary products, as well as in Incentive Bill 7, the DRS ancillary service, as well as the PCM and its modifications. And so the concerns you're raising are being addressed, but this is, again, a belt and suspenders methodology of trying to make sure the lights stay on. Why are y'all opposed?
Well, I mean, I'll be testifying on some of the other bills when they come up in the committee.
And you don't like them either?
We have constructive feedback on how to actually fix those to make them workable, and I'm looking forward to sharing that with y'all as well as providing that constructive feedback that you've requested over the next few days. This is a fundamental U-turn away from the competitive market, and what I have been told by companies across is why there's no faith that those will sit on the sidelines. They will impact the market. And they don't drive energy costs down for consumers because they are still built on a scarcity model. It still doesn't fix the economics of, some predictability and valuing dispatchable resources in our market and valuing actual reliability in our market. And that is actually something the PCM does address. And I know we've talked a lot about capacity markets in the past in this committee, and I mean, this is a massive capacity market. We're putting these resources on the backs of consumers and holding them outside the market.
You're calling this a capacity market, but you testified weeks ago that the PCM was not a capacity market.
It's a pay for performance mechanism. Right. This is paying them to sit on the sidelines until we need them for them to be available.
Is not the energy only market based on scarcity? You want to change that fundamentally? You're talking like in both ways. I want the energy only market, but I don't want scarcity.
We want to, so the way I explain the components of the current energy-only market, which we absolutely think should be retained and are important to make sure that consumer costs are low, is, that's kind of like having for a dispatchable resource. I want to qualify that it's for a dispatchable resource because we dispatch based on the lowest cost. And if you're an intermittent resource and you're available, you're always going to have the lowest cost. Yeah. And they drive those costs down, which benefits consumers. The issue is that if you are a dispatchable resource, the chances of you getting any meaningful revenue from energy prices and ancillary services prices is very unpredictable at best. So I would liken it to going into a lending institution as a residential consumer and saying, I want to get a 30-year mortgage, but I get paid on commission. And I don't know when I'm going to get paid or how much I'm going to get paid. Sometimes it's really good. Sometimes it's okay. Sometimes I'm not going to get anything. The PCM injects the reliability into this market that hasn't existed. When y'all opened the market in 2000, dispatchable and energy were the same because most of our fleet was dispatchable. So if you had energy, you had dispatchable resources and therefore you had reliability. In our current market, because we have such a massive amount of intermittent resources,
We understand the
they're
problem.
not the same.
And that's what we're trying to address with increasing the overall dispatchable generation to deal with the operational flexibility needs and the long-term management of the grid as well as the resource. The PCM is currently envisioned as, in my opinion, a capacity light model, but we don't need to go off on that again, but go ahead.
Members, any questions? Senator Colcourt.
Michelle, look, you and I have had some good meetings, and man, I really respect you. But one of those statements where you said it's like taking out a 30-year mortgage, and maybe you have some good days and you have some bad days, not sure if I can pay it back. Welcome to business. I mean, that's what I do every day of my life with my business partner, Jimmy Colcourt. I mean, that is why there's risk. There's absolute risk. And I know that you say it's regulated, but it's not regulated. We're all having that argument right now. But as I said, as a newcomer to BNC, that is the one thing that has become just blatantly obvious to me is, man, there is a lot of legacy out here that doesn't, I mean, we just want our guarantees. And, man, take the note that I got from a gentleman who said, he's actually he's a customer of Brazos Electric. They have no choice, right? He says his bill's gone up $1,000 a month right now because of bad decisions and mismanagement. And that is what these bills are trying to accomplish today. And we're going to have some great constructive conversations. But I really think that when you look at the backstop, and I can argue it either way, but I've got to say something. Americans pay every day to have a military and a fleet of jets and tanks and weapons for an insurance policy, just in case we need it. And I kind of liken that to those very dark days in February of 2021. So I want to go to what, so we can argue backstop. Should we have this insurance policy, this fleet, this backstop? But the part about the loan, that it has no value. So you're discounting that ESG, environmental social governance, is not real. That it could have an impact on your capital.
I'm not saying that ESG isn't real. I think that would be inaccurate for me to say, and it's not true. It does have an impact. But in terms of where an entity that invests is going to put their capital, if there's the ability to actually generate a return, they're going to put their capital there. Plants are being built in other markets. They're not being built here because the market doesn't value reliability and dispatchability. And I appreciate what you said about, taking the risk. Our member companies have been taking the risk, want to continue to take the risk. The issue is, we have what can be charged in this market capped. We have none of our expenditures that go into making the product capped, which is probably one of the few competitive entities that is true for. So you can charge whatever the market derives. These companies cannot. They're capped. That's a very transparent market.
But the difference is in my business, people have choices. And I know that we have this market out there, but not everywhere. And so there is some captivated market. I mean, it's not as easy. Consumers, it isn't like having a Burger King and a McDonald's on two different corners. You got to be pretty sophisticated to have your choices out there.
We've got 120 different retail electric providers, people choose from.
Well.
That's what they're choosing. They have. I'm in the competitive market. I've got 360 different options just on power to choose of plans to choose from. So there's a lot of competition.
Not true in all parts of the state, but
no, but some parts of the state were deliberately not open to competition. So they don't. They can't unless there's a vote of their, MOU or their co-op to do that. Now, we do have a co-op that did go into competition. And we have, Lubbock Power and Light that's going into competition. I think they'll be the first MOU to do that. So there are some that are doing that. But in the competitive parts of the state, there's very active, robust competition. And 99% of consumers in the competitive market are proactively choosing who they want. So, we are not the regulated portion of the industry. The wires and poles companies are. And yes, they have captive ratepayers and CCNs, and they have to go in and get, but we don't have any type of cost recovery. We don't have any type of guaranteed rate of return. We're not asking for that. We would just like a component of the market that values reliability and dispatchability so that, we can continue to build. That's what they do. That's what they want to do.
Could I conclude by your testimony on this SJR and SB6 that you're leaning more PCO?
We are, but we have a lot of constructive things that could be done to, make that a more robust system. As well as, some comments about some of the other components of other bills. We think there is work to be done, and we want to be constructive on that. Unfortunately, this is just not one that we think is workable.
Chairman.
Have you polled your 12 members as to whether or not they participate in the insurance program and bid in?
I haven't asked them specifically based on the substitute because, candidly, we got it at 6 o'clock this morning and they haven't had an opportunity to digest. But that is on my list of things to do. I think the issue is are they going to put capital into this market without that once you go down this road? And that's the risk, because you then have...
I understand it's a concern. I think there are ways that we're addressing it in other bills and that we have addressed already through changes in the ORDC curve, ancillary services, and other aspects that we're going to be moving forward with in this session. Your comments regarding the costs associated are significant. The bill is primarily about keeping the lights on and having that insurance program, that backup to our energy-only competitive market. But if we were to have this in place during Winter Storm Uri, we would not have had 5 days and $10.5 billion of securitization costs that are now being borne by ratepayers for decades.
Correct.
And so that in and of itself is a reason, but it's not the primary reason, but it is a significant reason to consider having a backup system that as a belt and suspenders to our energy-only market and the other things that are managing our grid. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Question for the author, because I've been listening on my way in from San Antonio. Mr. Chairman, do you continue, is section 1.10?
What page?
Let me look at that. Let me go to the subject matter where the two circumstances when the 10 gigawatts of gas would operate. Number one, when reserves are low enough to trigger rolling outages, and number two, for 336 hours per year as directed by ERCOT. Is that still in the committee sub? Basically, when it would run?
Yeah, the specific criteria for when it would run,
Yeah.
where is that, guys? Page 13. Page 13, line 5 of the sub. We did change that, and I mentioned it.
Y'all change it.
It would, line 8, when ERCOT determines that without generation by a regional reliability asset, an overload of a transmission system element will result in load shed for that region, or, line 12, as a last resort to avoid ordering involuntary load shed, and number 14, for not more than 336 hours per year for testing purposes.
Got it.
Those are the current criteria for when this asset, this reliability asset, could be activated.
And I think if I heard the witness's testimony correctly, thank you, Mr. Chairman, that your concern was that why would anybody risk investment if there was going to be competing with a fully regulated gas plant with a guaranteed rate of return? Was that what you're trying to say?
That's part of it. Your point about the 336 hours is kind of important because 336 hours in this market is very significant, and it's highly conceivable that that gets deployed to lower energy costs. So if that's the case, that's an out-of-market action that suppresses the only market signal currently in the market, and that would continue based on what we're talking about right now. And so that provides that the chances of a dispatchable generator being able to even earn the revenue they do currently would be substantially lower, which is a negative to investing.
So
Again,
here's my last.
Can I just interject? Sure. This is an insurance backup system. We don't, if we have a generator at our house, we don't go fire it up and run it concurrent with our electricity that's running. We utilize it in times of crisis, and this is exactly what we're trying to do here for Texas.
Mr. Chairman, I guess my last question to you is if you would do us a favor, obviously you've made your point in terms of why you're opposed, but the point I think the chairman's trying to make and everybody wants to have is we need to have a reliable grid at all times.
We agree.
Okay? Once 100% reliable. The other thing is we're all trying to get to that place at the most reasonable cost.
We agree
So,
as well.
thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
The 336 hours for testing is a subject of discussion. I understand your group didn't give us any feedback on that issue. That was based on other feedback from other stakeholders. But if you have an idea about the number of hours necessary to make sure a power plant's running and up to speed, we'd be happy to listen.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Zeffironi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Raymond, you said that you were against the bill, but you wanted to be part of the constructive process. Do you, at this point, have any recommendations about how you would improve the committee substitute, or is it too early?
I mean, we just received the committee substitute at 6 o'clock this morning, so I've sent it to all of my member companies, and I've asked them to review it and provide me feedback. So we expect to provide feedback to the committee once we've had the opportunity to do that.
Do you have any recommendations regarding the bill as filed?
I mean, the bill as filed is a complete U-turn away from the competitive market. So, I mean, we unfortunately didn't see changes that would make it workable. And so that was the feedback we gave with a number of points on why and what it does to the market. We're looking forward to going over the committee substitute and hopefully being able to provide some feedback that would be very helpful.
Thank you. Are there other ways that the bill would impact the wholesale market that you have not stated?
So when it's deployed, when the testing is deployed, it is an out-of-market action just like other out-of-market actions that ERCOT takes. And so the way that those are addressed in our current market is by dealing with them in the reliability deployment price adder, as well as part of the operating reserve demand curve. And so that should be part of that discussion if you're going to go down that path, because these are out-of-market actions that would need to be addressed in market prices in order to make sure that you aren't sending a really negative price suppressive investment signal in a market in which there's really no certainty.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And this is really just a comment before we go on to the next speaker, but I know that your customers want certainty to make sure that they've got revenue to operate in the marketplace. And I think what, at least from my perspective, what this bill tries to do is it's our way of trying to the chairman's way of trying to represent the people of Texas and make sure that they have certainty that their electricity is always going to come on. And that's the balance we're trying to get here, to make sure that we've got a competitive market so that investors come in and want to they can know that they can make money operating in the market, so they'll invest in it. But at the same time, we're trying to balance that with the fact of how do we make sure that electricity will always come on in emergencies. And I think that's what this is trying to do, is fit that middle ground. And anyway, with that, Mr. Alvarado, we'll go with you next.
Just get me. That's cool.
Good morning. My name is Mike Alvarado. I'm the president of Wattbridge, and I'm here to provide testimony in opposition of SB 6. Wattbridge has invested approximately.
Are you against the SJR as well? There's two
Yes.
things up. Thank you.
Wattbridge has invested approximately $2 billion in the last 36 months in ERCOT. We currently own, operate, and have under construction 2.5 gigawatts. 1,800 megawatts are currently operating. All of our investment has been in fast start dispatchable generation, a technology we believe is ideally suited to cost effectively address the reliability challenges in the market. Our portfolio has proven to be very effective in that regard over the last 24 months. Unfortunately, the market we invested in over the last 36 months is not the market that exists today. Senator Middleton, we have 3 assets totaling over 1,100 megawatts in your district. The current market, where real-time prices are continually dampened through out-of-market control, makes it very difficult today to justify the investment we made in those facilities. Once we complete our facilities currently under construction, which includes 384 megawatts in Senator Creighton's district, we do not anticipate investing any further in ERCOT. The current market conditions simply don't allow it. The legislation proposed by the Senate makes the current market that much more challenging for our business and provides additional conviction to our decision to cease our current development program in ERCOT and begin to look in other markets. Thank you.
Members, any questions?
Just a quick question. Your technology is primarily diesel-based, right? If I remember correctly?
No, it's gas-fired,
It's gas-fired.
aeroderivative
What's
technology.
the total number of megawatts y'all have installed?
We have 2,500 megawatts under construction. We have 1,800 megawatts currently operating, another 300 operating by the end of this month.
I toured your stacks. Y'all have megawatts down at stack, correct? Oh, that's what it said. I apologize. Would y'all fit the criteria for the RFP based on how you rate it now?
I think the credit requirements are pretty onerous from our
So
perspective.
I don't have the credit to.
15,000 megawatts of existing operating or megawatts under ownership, $10 billion of assets.
Y'all don't meet those criteria?
No.
Right. And I'll bring that up to the committee as a whole. It's difficult to draw a line about who can participate. It's not just current generation in Texas. It needs to be obviously some credit worthiness, they need to have a proven track record. And we open it up to competition through that RFP process of generators that meet the criteria, as well as TDU companies, for instance, that are in Texas but don't have any generation not MOUs, but like LCRA, for instance, would be able to potentially participate, as well as other electric providers in Texas. So it is fairly broad, but there is a line that needs to be crossed as far as their financial capacity and capability and proven track record to participate in something that we are considering it as an insurance product for the state.
Members? Senator
Yes.
Zaffarani?
Thank you. Sir, with more people moving into Texas every day and continuing to move into Texas, and there are some people who worry that by this summer, if we don't do something like have this insurance plan defined in Senate Bill 6, that we will not have the capacity to meet the demand. What if we didn't pass this bill and didn't have an insurance plan? Would it be your opinion that we could meet that demand as more people move into Texas?
I think our perspective, Senator, is we agree completely with the idea of improving reliability. We think our portfolio does exactly that. We just happen to believe that there are more cost-effective ways to achieve reliability and do it in a manner that is overall more sustainable to the market.
Well, I think most, if not all of us, would agree that what we are looking at is reliability, affordability, and sustainability. So what would be your recommendations for doing that if we don't pass Senate Bill 6?
We think PCM is the first right step. I think some of the comments made this morning about this is, there's not a single solution here we agree with completely. We think PCM is a step in the right direction in that it explicitly rewards the type of generation that's needed in this market. And Senator Schwartner, I appreciate your comments about credit requirements. Clearly, we've demonstrated we're capable and have a track record in this market.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sir, you just testified that you're not going to invest any further in the Texas market because it doesn't look attractive to you. What if there were low-interest loans available? Would that cause you to make more investments here?
Low-interest loans don't pay G&A.
So no.
They don't pay O&M.
And the interest is...
They don't pay gas demand charge. No.
Right. ESG factors, whatever they are, that's not what's driving your investment decision here,
Correct.
right? Okay. As far as concerns about the market overall, you're familiar with the experiment in California?
Yes, I am.
Are you concerned that if we undergo the exact same experiment in Texas, we're going to have the same result?
Yes.
That result being the lack of investment by private capital into competitive generation.
Correct. Look, I think from our perspective, Senator, it's not a question of labeling it re-regulation. I think when we build an asset, the first thing we think about is the perspective of a future buyer. And what is a future prospective buyer of this asset going to think about buying an asset in this market where the state's directly procuring generation? And that's what's most discouraging for us in terms of our future investment plan.
You're not here, you're not concerned about the inability to bid into this insurance program, right? Because that's just not your market space, correct?
We are. If it comes to pass, we would be very concerned because we'd be effectively eliminated from bidding based on how it's currently constructed. We don't agree with it, but we couldn't participate with how it's currently constructed.
And so you'd go elsewhere?
Yes.
Do you think that this is, you just testified that there are perhaps other ways to achieve reliability, so you're not testifying that reliability is not the main objective here, right?
No, we agree 100%. I think our assets are sort of exhibit A of our belief in reliability.
If we build a gigawatt of new backup reliable power and we lose a gigawatt of investment in new generation, what's our net reliability improvement?
Nothing.
Thank you.
Can I,
Chairman.
Senator Johnson brings up a good point, and I've heard it several times about California and their backup system, but I'm not an expert in California. I assume probably none of us are, but the concurrent changes in the California market, if there were any, to back up their system were, I believe, minuscule relative to what we are trying to do here in Texas with Senate Bill 7, what we've done already with Senate Bill 3 and the ORDC curve changes, the ancillary services that have been instituted already. So we are doing multiple concurrent things and doing a insurance program that is, I think, a stark difference than what the backup system that was backing up an ever-increasing penetration of renewables in California was doing.
And Mr. Chairman, I think that is a very important point. We don't have to do it like California, and perhaps this can be implemented successfully through a bunch of other mechanisms we do simultaneously. But I will say that a lot of discussion in the past year and a half, particularly concerning the PCM, for example, has been about the novelty of these ideas we approach to change our electricity market, and now we're layering novelty on top of novelty on top of novelty on top of novelty, and it's a risky move. And without, projecting anybody's vote, I think we have to ask ourselves how many experiments we want to try simultaneously, hoping that they all stitch together perfectly. It's a concern I have.
I appreciate that. Building 10 power plants is not novel in the sense that people know how to build power plants, and we know where to locate them, we know how to site them, and we know what we want and need to run our grid and assure citizens of Texas in times of crisis that generation, when we call upon it, when ERCOT says we need these turned on for whatever reason, would be there. And so what it does, the permutations on the actual market, the energy-only market, and the permutations on potentially retirements and other things are unknowns. I would agree with that. But they're also offset with some of the dynamic changes we see already with Senate Bill 3, as well as changes that we envision with further legislation here in this session.
And they could theoretically be offset by some version of a PCM. So
That's right.
it's a continued discussion.
And that continue, exactly. And I look forward to continued discussions about the PCM and how to make it more targeted dispatchable generation, the right size and the right type of program that fits in with our fabric of improving reliability and dispatchable generation in Texas.
And that last question we have lingering is, if we're doing all those other things, maybe all those other things do get us to the reliability without having 10 gigawatts of power on standby in perpetuity.
That's certainly possible, Senator, but I don't know if the people of Texas are going to accept that. I think they want assurances. They want that insurance. They want to know that we have it, and we have done what we need to do to take care of Texas and Texans.
Thank you, Julia. And maybe somebody could answer for me as you're just going forward, because we have municipally owned utilities and cooperatives that are not in the competitive market, and they're building generation outside of the competitive market. And maybe you can talk about that a little bit too, because it seems we are doing some things that are not part of the competitive world. Go ahead and introduce yourself. You know the drill.
Good morning, everybody, Mr. Chairman and members. My name is Julia Rathgaber, and I'm representing Berkshire Hathaway Energy in support of Senate Bill 6. Berkshire sees the bill as an opportunity to invest in Texas, and that's what my bosses want to do. While parts of Senate Bill 6 are similar to legislation that Berkshire Hathaway supported last session, Senate Bill 6 is actually much broader in its scope. It would allow certification to construct insurance generation by not only most of the existing companies here in Texas, such as Luminant, NRG, and NextEra, but it could also attract companies like ours and many of the other largest generating companies across the United States. In addition to creating the Texas Energy Insurance Program to provide emergency dispatchable generation when Texas needs it most, the bill also creates a fund to modernize and maintain existing dispatchable generation, which is a new concept that was not around last session. That generation has served us well over the last couple of years as a reliability asset. It's important to note that SB 6 can also work with other market reforms, such as the performance credit mechanism or other opportunities that you all are considering for helping our market handle the continuing population and economic growth over a longer term. Finally, I believe that this bill is the only bill that you're going to hear today that guarantees new construction of generation built here in Texas. If you want steel in the ground, this is the bill that does it out of the ones that you're going to hear today. Thank you for the opportunity to be here, and I'll try and answer any questions.
Members, Senator Colcourse.
Do you think that this quells all competition? Having a fleet that sits on the side as an insurance policy?
I think, no, I don't. And the reason I don't is because it operates outside of the market, and it doesn't participate in the market unless ERCOT turns it on. And so the argument, and Michelle's good at it, is that you've got these generating facilities sitting over here not doing anything. Why don't you just bring them into the market? Well, if the legislation doesn't allow it, the legislation doesn't allow it. So you don't just randomly ruin the rest of the market by pulling in subsidized assets, because it won't be in competition with the regular market. These assets are sitting on the sidelines until Texas gets to EEA, Emergency Alert Level 3. So all of the rest of the generation has been on at the cap, the price cap, since EEA 1. So they're operating, and then we're about to go to rolling blackouts, and ERCOT turns on these extra facilities. Those facilities operate until the grid is stabilized, then they're turned off. The rest of the market is still operating. They're all running full tilt generation at the price cap the whole time. So it's not like we pulled somebody off of the price cap, or they didn't get paid as much because of these machines running. All that happened is we avoided the rolling outages. So they're not competing on a day-to-day basis with existing generation. And they're not taking generation away at times when we need it most.
So do you see this as a different model than California?
Yes, I do. I'm not an expert on California, but I'll do some research on it. But I do see it as a very different model. And the reason is because I think the California model is more a part of their day-to-day operations as opposed to this one, which it's not.
And unless the legislature changes legislation, which could be the threat, that could be the threat. It could say, well, look, the legislature every 2 years, the House turns over or does not, or there's elections, and people could change their minds. And with one swoop of a bill, you could say, man, this becomes a part of the competing fleet. Is that potentially their fear? I don't want to get in a panel where we get in these discussions. I did that in Health and Human last night. Not a good idea.
I assume so. I really can't speak for them, so I guess so. I don't see it as a threat, and the reason I don't see it as a threat is because I can't see the Texas legislature suddenly deciding to get rid of 10 gigawatts of electricity and throwing away. I mean, it just doesn't make sense to me.
Well, but on the flip side, and the argument could be, oh my gosh, the taxpayers or the ratepayers are going to sit there and pay for, in a way, the taxpayers, both, are going to sit there and pay for something that just sits on the side. It's a waste of money, right?
Well, it's not a waste. You're paying for reliability.
Do you consider insurance a waste? I mean, really? People,
I'm a former
people that are
insurance-
listening to this. When you buy insurance, do you hope you use it, or do you hope you have it?
Sometimes.
And
it's a
that was going to be
That's true.
my next point,
sorry.
because
had to
to the
interject.
gentleman that said my bill has gone up $1,000 a month. Put that in perspective. I mean, we're talking about $2 or $3 a month, right? $1,000
Unless
a
the
month.
state steps in and diminishes that cost significantly.
I'm just saying compared to the $1,000 a
Sure.
month that the gentleman wrote me about. I don't know. It is similar to an insurance policy.
Sure.
To say,
Expensive.
I'm going to amortize this risk, and I'm going to pay this little bit instead of the catastrophic event. It's Health and Human, health insurance. You hope you never have to use it. You hope that you don't have that day of a car wreck or cancer, but sure is good to have it when you have a $2 million medical bill.
Chairman, I've got to step away, but before I do, you didn't mention where you're at on SJR1.
I didn't register in support of it, but we support it. I can do so if you want me to.
Would you like us to change it? It's up to you.
Sure.
Sure.
You're welcome to.
Clerk.
Senator Nichols with Chair.
I gotta go vote too. You gotta go.
Okay.
He's got the same problem.
Senator Campbell, you want to come over here?
And I have to go to redistricting,
You got to go vote too?
redistricting.
Okay.
I told him there's 5 in there.
I'm going to be right back.
Okay.
I'm going to stay here, Mr. Chairman.
It's too much fun. I'm going to ride the wave with y'all today.
All right.
Can I make one?
Senator Campbell,
Where do you want me to sit first?
over here would be best. That way you can see the monitor about who's going to be. Senator Johnson, please.
Just one contextual comment. We're not on 2012 yet, but we're all shrugging about $2 to $3 a month, and I can shrug with you. But I remember this whole panel being quite upset about $2 to $3 a month when we were talking about the PCM. So we're going to pay for this stuff.
Well,
And
the PCM is different depending on residential versus large load. Large load pays, right? I mean, the overall cost in the PCM model, as envisioned and passed by the PUC, is a 25% increase in wholesale electric prices. Someone's paying for that.
I imagine we'll have witnesses that don't agree with the numbers, but I agree. Yeah.
And this is socialized across all ratepayers as well, but not, and it is based upon load, but it's not the sheer dollar amounts that we're talking about relative, 10 billion versus whatever the PCM is.
460 million, say some people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
It's all
5.7 versus 5.2, and then, that's an ongoing cost into perpetuity, right?
Well, 460 million, it may not be in perpetuity because theoretically you incentivize new generation. All this stuff is theoretical.
It's
I
self-shrinking.
don't even know if these plants are going to turn on. That's theoretical. They probably will.
Next.
It's our fault if they don't, and you've got.
Fault won't help us. Fault won't help us. If I get run over by a car and it's their fault, I'm still dead.
I hope it doesn't happen.
I don't want that to happen.
Campbell, let's call the next witness to get this going.
Madam
Senator Johnson and I are going
Okay.
off the rails here.
All right, Senator Zaffarini, you've got a question.
Yes, I do. Thank you. Ms. Rathgaber, what revenues have you modeled in case your company is selected, and what would it cost you?
We don't know actually yet until we see kind of what shakes out as you make amendments to the bill. I mean, it changed from the filed version to the one that we got this morning. So I don't think we have an actual, I know we don't have a revenue estimate right now. I can tell you that last session, the expense of putting together the Berkshire plan from last session was $8.3 billion for 10 gigawatts. That has gone up because of inflation and supply chain issues to a little over 10 billion, perhaps 10.3, 10.8. There's a guess, but that was for last session's proposal. Like I said, we don't quite know what this session's proposal entails.
Do you think you would be able to obtain the materials and equipment you'd need to build 10 gigawatts in the next 5 years?
Yes, I do. And the reason I do is because Berkshire did a lot of work to try and put together their proposal last time. And because they have done that, they've had a practice exercise involved in acquiring the right materials. It is taking longer. Last session, it was about 3 years, and now it's a little bit longer, 3.5, 42 months or so is our estimate.
Do your cost estimates to date include being in compliance with the new EPA guidelines proposed for Texas?
Yes.
All of that has been considered?
I've been told yes, so I can double check that. But again, it's a case of we do need to see what it is you choose and what you need. I mean, if it's 5 gigawatts, not 10, that changes the equation as well.
But you don't have other cost estimates, for example, the cost of connecting and ensuring transmission, et cetera?
No,
You're not prepared to do that? At what point will you be?
I don't know. I think we can when we've got a non-changing proposal. I'll ask them to do that. If see if they can.
And you're testifying in support of this bill, but do you like it as is, or do you have suggestions for improving it?
I've sent it, as Michelle did, to the company, and I'm hoping that they're going to show me the edits that they'd like in this piece of legislation. There's some questions that they have about stranded costs and how that would work. So I have a feeling we're going to have some small edits, but I don't expect it to be wholesale change. I mean, it'll be, have you thought about this or that kind of changes.
Okay.
Senator Zaffarini.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. Is it Corey?
Yes.
Let's go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Corey Ampther, president of Enchanted Rock. We're a Houston-based microgrid developer. We have about 280 sites in operation in Texas right now, over 600 megawatts. We operate dual-purpose microgrids, and they're natural gas fired, but we provide backup to commercial and industrial customers, and then provide services back to the grid at the same time. And so this is very important to us. You know, talking about resiliency is very important. Talking about insurance, we understand that too, because our customers want that, and we provide that to them. But what made our business successful and still successful today is that we came up with the idea that, you shouldn't just have an insurance product that's sitting there operating for just very seldom times, hardly that ever happen. You should use that product or asset efficiently to operate in several different ways, right? And so what we do is we provide backup to our customers, but then we also provide power to the grid. I think that's the same thing. That's why we're in opposition to this SB 6, is that we believe that building assets and just having them sit there as an insurance product without providing any other services is inefficient. It provides resiliency, but it's inefficient way of, investing capital. We think the market, should incent dispatchable generation. We're a big fan of that. We believe in that. That's what our generation is. But that dispatchable generation should be operating in the market every day, and there needs to be incentives to increase dispatchable generation, but we don't believe this is the right way to do it.
Madam Chair.
Members, any questions? Senator Menendez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So you've heard the testimony this morning, correct?
Correct.
And this is probably for all of you. We now know the goal of the chair, and we all share the goal to give Texans reliability and a feeling of assurance that when they hit the light switch, the lights are going to turn on. You also know where the goalposts are. Goalposts, he's mentioned 10 megawatts. 10 megawatts, and apparently I've heard 10.8 billion is what you think it'll cost?
Most, yes.
Okay, so let's say $10 billion. Does that include your rate of return?
Yes.
Okay, so 10.8, and do we know approximately what rate that would be?
I believe it was 9%.
Not 9% was last session, right? Okay, so now that everybody in the room is aware, you know what you need to beat. So you need to ask yourself, under all the other bills, ask yourselves, can you get to 10 megawatts in the amount of time? Because if you can, what I don't like about it, I like the assurance part. I don't like paying for something that's going to sit on the sidelines. It concerns me that we're saying that the state of Texas can't figure out how to build a grid that's going to be reliable enough when we have all the resources we have all the people in the room, we have all this competitive nature. We're the 9th largest economy in the world, and we can't figure this out. And I think, based on what I've heard, that if we make adjustments to the current market, there are many of you who say we will continue to invest. Would you continue to invest in Texas if we didn't do this?
Absolutely.
So if we didn't disrupt the current market?
Correct. Yes.
So y'all need to get on your horses and look at all of the bills and say, what can we do, and then present it to the chairman and the committee, because we need to do something that sends a clear message that we came here to fix this so that Winter Storm Uri doesn't happen again. I just, at the end of the day, whether we call them ratepayers or taxpayers, our constituents are the same ones, and they're going to be paying for this. And so whether it's a residential person on a single fixed income, or a small mom and pop business, or a big multinational corporation, they're all the same. They pay, and the big businesses pass on the cost to their consumer. So I think we need to be real thoughtful about how we move forward. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Senator Johnson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And in case it's lost on anybody, I have great respect for the idea and for the chairman. So if I sound like I don't like it, it's just
Because that's your normal sound.
it's no, it's not.
Sorry, you walked right into that.
I suppose. But your testimony, sir, regarding microgrids reminds me of one of the concepts we're talking about here, operational flexibility. In a sense, the microgrids themselves could add to operational flexibility, can't they?
Yes.
Can you explain how?
Yes. So we operate primarily as backup, right? But when the grid's available, we might as well be doing something else. So we provide support to the grid. Whenever prices are elevated, we can operate in certain ancillary service programs.
And this might be a better question for ERCOT, and I'm sure we have resource witnesses here, but the presence of a microgrid on a feeder could assist in proper load shed management, couldn't it?
Exactly, yes.
So in an overall context, as we talk about backup systems and insurance policies, I think it's important to note that this 10 gigawatts sitting on the sideline, while it does add reliability, it is steel in the ground, it's not operational flexibility, because we're not operating with it. We're not there until we're all done being flexible. It's not really resource adequacy, because it's not there in the market. It's responses to emergencies. It's responses to Uri. It's making sure that we don't have ventilators that shut down because someone doesn't have power and people don't die and we don't have $200 billion in insurance claims. All that's good, but it's none of those first two things. So we have to get to the question of, is there a better way really to respond to emergencies? I mean, we would come out of Uri better if we had weatherization. We'd come out of Uri better if we had mapping. If we'd done all the things that Chairman Schwertner and others, all of us worked on last session in SB3, which was great work, I don't think we would have encountered the problems that we encountered in Uri. So now we're asked the question, are we going to build this extra market mechanism solely to avoid a disaster like Uri? I don't want another disaster like Uri, and if it cost us $3 a month to avoid it, maybe we should. I just want to make sure that's what we're talking about as opposed to all these other things so that we keep the conversation clear.
I would like to just add one concept to what you're talking about, and that is that.
Microphone.
Pardon?
The microphone.
I'm sorry. I think it's important to note that the Public Utility Commission has made some changes in the way that our consumers, our customers, your voters, are paying for electricity already. They've shifted the ORDC, the Operating Reserve Demand Curve. I mean, your constituents are already paying more than they were pre-URI for reliability, and nothing dispatchable has been built. So I would like to point at, okay, you get what you pay for.
Some dispatchable has been built.
Yeah.
Right.
And right here.
And I do want you to continue. I just wanted to make sure that's some dispatch. Not enough, though. We all
Not
agree,
enough.
not enough.
And I do-
Okay, let's see, let's get back to the person who's got mine.
No, I
Are
mean,
there-
we've built dispatchable generation. I think we just heard that
Yep.
he's built dispatchable generation. The
Right.
market is working. We've made a lot of progress so far, right?
Thank you. Thank you. Members, are there any other questions?
And be it known, some of these higher prices are not merely because of PUC changes. We have higher prices because we have a global market for natural gas,
Exactly.
and it's a pretty tight one right now.
Thank you, Senator Johnson. Members, any other questions for this panel? If not, thank you very much.
Thank y'all.
Let's see, Corey, you registered, what's your position on SJR number 1? You read, Corey Amther.
He needs to register a position.
Okay, you need to register if you would for SJR 1. Thank you so much. The chair now calls up Trish Demeter, Carl, how do you pronounce his last name? Musin, Cyrus Reed, Dave Cortez. Let me give you your spot there. Mm-mm.
Oh, let's finish up.
Okay.
I'm sitting in your spot.
Good morning.
What they're for, against, or whatever.
Trish, we'll start with you. Members, please, witnesses, please state your name clearly for the record and your position on, for, or against the bill. And you have 2 minutes for testimony. And then after, are you having everybody give their testimony first? And then questions? Then questions. What do you prefer?
Questions after each person.
I think that would be good. Okay, so members will do questions after the testimony of the witnesses has been heard. Thank you. Go ahead, Trish.
Thank you, Senator. Chairman Schwartner, Vice Chairman King, Senator Campbell, and members of the Senate Committee on Business and Commerce, thank you for allowing me to testify. I'm Trish Demeter here on behalf of the Texas Advanced Energy Business Alliance. We represent businesses that are lowering consumer costs, creating thousands of new jobs, and providing a full range of clean, efficient, reliable energy. We advocate for policies that grow robust markets for the technologies that our member companies are bringing to the table. We respectfully oppose Senate Bill 6 because we believe the legislation does not provide for technological flexibility and undermines technological innovation that is at the heart of the Texas market. Under normal conditions, the ERCOT grid is, we believe, largely secure based on availability of dispatchable generators and all of the new generation that is in the queue. To meet reliability challenges ahead, Texas must take a more holistic approach that considers small, distribution-connected resources and flexible demand, options that can be pursued quickly and cost-effectively to enhance grid resilience. SB 6 lacks that flexibility in the types of technologies that could achieve the same goal of providing dispatchable energy to the grid. Distributed energy resources are smaller, more flexible systems and can be installed at the distribution system level or behind the meter at the customer's facility. Battery storage, these are things like solar, battery storage, demand response, electric vehicles, and their charging equipment. Distributed energy resources provide more affordable alternatives to large-scale build-out of power plants. Batteries are flexible in the sense they can dispatch energy to the grid and also take energy off of the grid. and act as a load smoothing asset. So in those times of peak demand, they can offer a tremendous benefit. We recommend that we continue to work on these alternatives to encourage. We do have a report we issued last year that has very specific policy recommendations on how to encourage this suite of
Ma'am,
technologies.
I have to
Okay.
wrap.
Thank you.
And we certainly can forward that report. It is a hefty document, but we can forward that to the committee. Thank you.
Thank you. I know it's hard because y'all got a lot of important things to say, but when the red light comes on, please quit talking.
Okay.
Sir?
Thought we were taking questions.
Well, I'm sorry, you're right. Members, are there any questions?
No, he'd rather wait.
No,
Right.
we can do questions each time. But
Yeah,
Just
thank,
Senator Menendez.
thank you. I appreciate that, Mr. Chairman. You know, this is a complicated issue, and so I was curious if you could elaborate a little bit on the demand side distributed solutions that you have in mind, because I think I'm very interested in the demand response in particular, but go ahead, if you could tell me.
Thank you, Senator Menendez. We believe so the suite of technologies, really energy efficiency investments. Texas has a tremendous potential to increase investments in energy efficiency. There's a lot of untapped. The last time the state did a full-scale potential study was in 2008, and that was before smart meters, smart thermostats, and LEDs were broadly available. So we do believe that taking a look at how much energy that we could save by simply encouraging folks to save more could really help reduce that overall demand. So that would be taking a look at the State Energy Efficiency Resource Standard. Utilities are overachieving on that standard every year since 2003, so there's a lot of headroom to increase those targets and goals for utilities. For distributed generation, we do believe that for critical facilities, you could certainly, and if the concern especially is around these times of winter storms and summer peak, to focus policy solutions on those facilities that we would not want to lose power. So this could be ensuring things like nursing homes have backup power requirements to require either a certain number of days of fuel storage for a backup power system, or to target energy efficiency upgrades to those facilities so that they're reducing their overall demand.
So while I thank you, did you hear earlier when I mentioned to everyone, I said, you know what the goal is. Resilience of the goal of this bill is 10 megawatts, and my thought is whatever ideas you all have to create new either potential on-demand response or the ability to turn stuff off to reduce the demand, if you'd let us know and as soon as possible, that'd be great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Members? Just one question. You mentioned the smart meters, and I guess that's always been a disappointment for me, is that we spent billions of dollars across ERCOT, in certain areas anyway, to have smart meters, and they had all these things they were going to do with regard to demand response, and also I could turn on my crock pot from the office as I'm driving home on an app, and all these things that never materialized, and not by anybody's ill will, but all they really are used for is turning on and turning off and letting you know if your power's out, letting the TDU know. So I guess that's one thing I would ask is we've tried to move toward demand response, and there's a lot of things we're doing that on more on a large scale, but the smart meters have not been very successful in that. Do you think that's still possible without a complete refit, or?
Senator King, very, very good question. I would say that the hardware of a smart meter, smart thermostat really is only as useful as what happens behind that in terms of rate making, price signaling.
And I guess that's what worries me so much is if you try to address this from a whole plethora of little things, they eventually all add up.
That's right.
But we're kind of in a jam of, do we need to do something really big while we wait for all those little things to come on, if they ever do? So, and I'm sorry, that's more of a comment. Sir, you want to go ahead?
Good morning, Senators, Chairman, Committee. Thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to speak today. My name is Carl Mewson. I'm here on behalf of Wärtsilä North America. I'll be testifying on the bill. We are a technology provider manufacturing reciprocating internal combustion engines, or RICE technology, and provider of utility-scale energy storage systems. I'll note that Wartsila is not a market participant in the ERCOT markets. However, we are proud providers of almost 850 megawatts currently in Texas, soon to be over 1 gigawatt of rice resources, and 440 megawatts of battery storage in service today, and that number is soon to be over 900 megawatts. As a Finnish company founded in 1834, we are all too familiar with extreme weather and what it takes to build equipment capable of operating through that. We also have our U.S. headquarters here in Houston and have experience dealing with extreme weather that Texas can challenge with. However, our rice technology has shown that it can help Texas maintain reliability through the worst weather that it can offer, hot or cold. In fact, during Winter Storm Uri, our engines continued to operate for South Texas Electric Cooperative, helping to mitigate the impact of the storm for their 290,000 customers. The words we use usually define or limit the potential solutions we can consider when solving problems. This is particularly significant in the context of legislation. As I mentioned above, we provide reciprocating internal combustion engines, a fast start, fast stop, fast restart technology. Should the Senate choose to move forward with this particular bill, we urge them to ensure that the solutions for electricity generation not be limited to a single technology, but to allow for any technology that can provide the operational attributes needed. Why is this important? We want to make sure that a technology that can ramp to full load in less than 5 minutes, be offline in a minute, and be back online in about 5 minutes after that, and run efficiently as at low as a couple megawatts, not be excluded from the solutions considered. In short, I assert that our rice technology fits the problems that Texas is looking to solve. I want to make sure it is not excluded from consideration. Thank you very much.
Members, any questions?
I didn't understand if he was for, on, or against the bill.
On. We're testifying on.
So you're on the bill. Your concern is that your technology that you provide is not potentially included in the legislation.
That is what we want to make sure is available to us. Yes, Senator.
Would you be in favor of language that would make it agnostic towards the technology as long as it was dispatchable? That would include you and possibly others.
So as a company, we sit here and we see that there are a variety of different options to achieve the reliability goals that have been stated by Senator Schwartner and yourself. We're not opining on that. We understand and expect that there is a need for new capacity. How the state of Texas goes about incentivizing that build, we'll defer to those that are going to actually be building the steel. We'll be providing the steel that they'll build.
Interesting answer. Okay. So if the current market is not changed, do you see that you would, is yours a technology that's acquired by someone that's looking to develop new generation, or do you actually develop the generation yourself?
We do not do the development of the sites. Yeah. We provide the engines that will run and provide the energy output for them.
So you're just concerned that your technology doesn't get excluded?
That's correct, sir.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Members? Senator Zaffarani?
I believe it was last week we received some very interesting handouts from Wartsila. Have you made those available to all the members of the committee?
We certainly can.
You didn't bring those today?
Do we bring? If they're not here, they'll be here by the end of the day, ma'am.
Okay, I think those would be very helpful to lend insight into your company. They're very impressive, very well done.
Thank you very much.
Informative, thank you. They answered my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Reed?
Thank you. For the record, Cyrus Reed, Lone Star Chapter of the Sierra Club. I have a 4-pager. We are against SB 6, and we are against SGR 1, but I want to be constructive. So, first 2 pages, just a reminder, I'm going to say it again, it's not just about the supply side. So page 2 of my testimony, a day in December in ERCOT, 50%, and this is just a cold day in the Dallas area, so 50% of the load growth is residential load. Second figure, we as a state are well behind every other state in terms of our programs and the potential we have for energy efficiency. So I think I said this after the Lieutenant Governor's press conference. If we ignore the demand side and only focus on solutions on the supply side, We're going to overbuild and we're going to cost customers way too much, and there are better solutions. So now let me talk about the bill itself. We don't like this as the solution because what you're doing is saying 10,000 megawatts, we're going to put it on ratepayers' back, we're going to put stranded costs on ratepayers' back, and it's not necessarily the best solution because there are other technologies out there that we've already heard about, and we already have some existing programs. We have a program in ERCOT, it's called the Emergency Response Service. It's much smaller than 10,000 megawatts, but it works, right? It's demand response and it's backup generation more on the distributed side. And one thing we did, ERCOT and PUC did, is we upped the budget from 50 million to 100 million. 100 million is a lot less than 10 billion. I think we could increase that ERS amount and build local demand response and local backup generation that would be cost effective and could be used at other times as well. And we think that would be a much better solution. Also don't like the state getting in the business of loaning out money and having political appointees make decisions about loans for private entities. And thank you.
Senator Zaffarini.
So what are your other solutions? I'm sure you didn't get to them all.
Yeah, so solutions are, and there are other bills that would do this, increase energy efficiency goals, make sure residential demand response can work through the retail electric providers, pass your excellent bill making sure that distributed generation can participate in the market, make sure that we have modern building codes in place so that new construction uses less. And we do like some of the solutions in some of the other bills that we'll talk about later. We think there are ways to make some of those bills work. This bill we do not like.
Any other solutions?
Well, one of the solutions is to have some operating flexibility, such as a DRRS. We think that actually is a good idea because that actually responds to problems in the markets we have at certain times of the year. So that would be a solution within the market that would actually work.
I'm surprised you didn't mention renewables. How would this bill impact renewables?
So this bill is creating this particular bill is creating basically an insurance policy that we believe is on the back of ratepayers. I don't know that it directly impacts renewable generation. In fact, some would argue that it's going to disincentivize the dispatchable generation that you all say you need, meaning the renewables come in, and then this is the last resort, and it doesn't really resolve that problem of having dispatchable at certain times of the year.
The California problem.
California did something very similar, right? They went big on renewables and said we have
a lot of market reforms.
And then they did market reforms and had backup powers, and it ended up being very expensive for everyone. So we don't see this as a good solution.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
But solar plus storage does work as a dispatchable technology. I'll say that.
Members? Thank you. Sir?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, Mr. Chair, all y'all. My name is Dave Cortez. I just want to say thank you. This is really tough stuff. I am not one of these folks. I don't work for a big energy company. I don't know this policy. I do some work around the state talking to low-income folks, fixed-income folks, and did a lot of response around Winter Storm Uri. My mom was supposed to be here today. She's actually a constituent of yours, Senator Zaffarini, lives in southeast Travis County. She got the flu, so she's not here. She is fixed income, like many other fixed income Texans. The cost of electricity has skyrocketed since the winter storm, and this includes the impact of decisions made last legislative session, includes the rising cost of electricity because the rising cost of gas, as we're seeing because of the war in Ukraine, the increased pressure from exporting gas abroad, and we're just watching bills go up for people left and right. And the reason I'm opposed to this today, and she is opposed to this today, is because we're talking about adding more costs for everyday Texans who already struggle to pay their bills. So when we talk about people being concerned about keeping the lights on and whether the electricity is going to stay on, I need to implore you to consider that Texans are equally concerned about paying their bills. There's a story in the Dallas Morning News recently showing that 45% of Texans polled are cutting spending on basic needs to pay their monthly energy bills. Many of you all have kids, you have grandkids. I have a 4-year-old who is a pandemic child, lived through the winter storm. She knows all about these things now, and she knows about electricity. With your permission, I'd love to play just a 10-second little comment she had for you on my audio. This is my daughter, Addison. Okay, it's not working. But what she said was, "Hey, senators, save electricity." She's 4 years old. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Senator Zaffarani?
So how would this particular bill impact the average ratepayer?
Again, my limited understanding, not being a policy wonk and not being one of these folks in the room, it sounds like we are going to be, if I heard Chairman Schwartner's words correctly, socializing the costs of building 10,000 megawatts of gas onto ratepayers. So I believe that means it's going to add to people's bills.
But wouldn't the same ratepayers be delighted to know about an insurance program?
You know, I know that working Texans and low-income Texans struggle to pay insurance, and they struggle to pay energy bills. They struggle to pay for rising costs of groceries. I don't know that they'd be excited about a new bill. I can say that much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tell your mother thank you, too.
I will.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Members, any other questions? Thank you, panel.
Thank you.
Next up, Emma Pabst, Mark Bell, Cliff Lange, and Bill McCullum. And again, please stop talking when it gets to red so that I don't have to very politely ask you to. We've just got so many bills today and a lot of witnesses.
Yeah, they did good.
And so many committees.
Done really well. Yeah, I know.
So, Mr. Bell, why don't we just start with you? Again, everybody remember, tell us who you are, who you represent, whether you're testifying on, for, or against, and talk the bill and the SJR.
All right. Good morning. Thank you, Chairman, and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Mark Bell. I'm the president of AECT, the Association of Electric Companies of Texas, and I'm here to testify in opposition of Senate Bill 6 as filed, but and while I didn't register on the SJR, I would be on the SJR, and I'll correct
that. To show that you are on the SJR?
That's correct. So AECT is a trade organization representing investor-owned companies in all sectors of the electric industry. Senate Bill 6, we believe, would be counter to the basic construct of the Texas competitive wholesale market in ERCOT as we know it today. The government procurement of regulated generation would potentially create the highest cost for consumers of any market concept under consideration right now. And if the measure is passed, every consumer in ERCOT will pay a new socialized rate for state-backed generation that mostly sits on the sidelines. It will also signal to investors that ERCOT will have two classes of generation, one that includes government-backed generation and one that is funded by private capital. Moving on to some technical concerns that we have with the plan itself, and we appreciate the being able to work with the senator on these changes. The interconnection timeline we thought was a challenge, and I think you addressed that in the sub, as well was the generation permitting and the revisions to the interconnection queue. And finally, Senate Bill 6 also includes a program to offer the low-interest loans to dispatchable generation. While we have concerns about this program and how it could create some distortions in the competitive wholesale market, it's far less disruptive than the out-of-market construct, and we have some thoughts on how to improve the program, such as allowing weatherization and energy efficiency as eligible uses of the fund. Appreciate the opportunity to work with you, Senator, and thank you for taking our input, and I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Zaffarani.
Thank you. Mr. Bell, if the TEIP units were held back until a true emergency, how would those units impact the market?
Well, I think it just sends the signal, a couple of things. One, fundamentally, we believe that we need a comprehensive approach, and we think the competitive market is the best place for reliability. And if we send the right market signals, then reliability will come. And so it potentially could send the wrong signal to the market participants in terms of their investment. Typically, investors want to look at a guaranteed rate of return, and that 10,000 megawatts, depending on how it changes over the course of time, could potentially be a challenge to investing in the market.
Thank you. How would they impact plant retirements?
Well, it certainly impacts plant retirements. We're told that for those plants that are becoming less economic because of their age, then it places a challenge on them. I think there's some other proposals that potentially could help with that as well. So,
How long does it take to build gas plants?
that's a good question. I think anywhere from 3 to 7 years, probably more in the 5 to 7 years range, based on supply chain and being able to procure, land and all the things that you need to do to connect to transmission.
Thank you. In your oral testimony, you mentioned some improvements, and you mentioned a couple. Do you have any others that you didn't mention?
No, I think I covered most of them at a very high level, and we look forward to looking at the substitute and continuing to work with.
I was looking for a lower level. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mark, am I correct that it's potentially faster if you're adding on to an existing facility or building where that infrastructure is already in place? Doesn't that help
Absolutely
speed up that?
It does, because you're already connected, close to transmission, and you've got some of the fundamental infrastructure that you would need in order to build these plants. That's correct.
There's nothing in the bill that would prohibit someone from being a part of this, but just adding on to their existing or building alongside their existing facility where they've already got lines and poles.
That's my understanding.
And water and whatever they need. Great, thank you. Members, any questions? Senator Menendez?
Chairman King, you just brought up a very interesting scenario. So in the event that this bill were to pass, and let's say one of your member companies decided to say, well, we're going to bid in, and because we're going to build our emergency-only generator on the side, where we're already connected and everything, to lower our cost of entry to potentially be the low bidder, what would prevent them from saying, well, when I have to shut down for maintenance my existing generation, I'm going to run my emergency-only generation? And how would we control that? How would we know?
These would be designated as reliability assets and would not be allowed to do that.
But how would we control it? How would we know? If under the scenario,
I think when a power plant's running.
Well, so Chairman King just said, wouldn't it be cheaper for someone to build generation right on their existing site, just add a little bit more generation?
The siting of the would be as directed by the PUC, depending upon the needs of Texas and the help and support of the grid. If it happens to be in a region that has a power plant and that NRG or Luminant or whoever, new entrant, wanted to build it, well, not a new entrant, but wanted to build it co-located in a way that made sense, that had ring fences or whatever, I think that's probably a reasonable thing to do.
I appreciate the answer. You sparked a scenario that I thought, wow, that'd be interesting, because obviously the plants have to continue to have maintenance, and you have to take some off. And so I guess what you're saying is we would ask them to build something and they'd have to keep it offline. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Members?
Yes, sir.
Senator Johnson?
Again, Senator King, we've talked before about the expediency of building on a brownfield site, and it certainly is a factor. I wonder, witnesses here today and others that may come up, if you're a generator and you have the prospect and you qualified to bid in for this backup generation, might you also have the incentive to just scrape the existing very pretty old steamer towers and build the new gen under the regulated rate of return, because some of those old plants just aren't very profitable. I just wondered, all witnesses who are coming up, touch on that subject.
Members? Thank you. Ma'am?
Thank you. Good morning, Senators, and thank you for having me. My name is Emma Pabst. I am a born and raised Texan, a constituent of Senator Schwartner, and a customer of TXU Energy. I'm here today to testify in opposition to Senate Bill 6 and SJR 1 because of the harm that these bills will do to my community. Growing up as a kid, I remember my dad pulling up his truck outside the house and taking out these huge, pink, fluffy-looking sheets and carrying them into the house one by one. I asked him what they were, and much to my chagrin, they were not cotton candy, but rather insulation that he was going to install in our attic. He explained to me that while he wanted to put solar panels on our house one day, he thought it was more important to insulate the house first because you want to get the most use out of your power. You want to make sure that that hot air or cold air stays inside of your home and doesn't leak to the outside. That made a lot of sense to me then, and it still makes a lot of sense to me now. Why would we force Texas ratepayers to pay for building more expensive and polluting power plants when we could instead lower our electricity use and fortify the grid by protecting our homes? Senator Schwartner, you mentioned having a generator at home. I can't afford to pay for my own generator, nor can I afford to pay for the state of Texas to build 10,000 megawatts of what is functionally supposed to be my generator. And I definitely can't afford to pay that just for those plants to sit around until we need them at the very last minute. Since Winter Storm Uri, my gas, electric, and water bills have doubled. Cumulatively, these bills are costing me an additional $180 a month. I cannot afford to subsidize the gas industry any more than we already are. Neither can my fellow Texans. Instead, I urge all of you to invest in energy efficiency measures that improve the quality of our homes and businesses while lowering stress on our electric grid. This is the single most cost-effective way to fortify the grid and help the people of Texas. Thank you.
That was
timing.
perfect
Yeah.
timing, by the way.
Thank you for coming.
Members, any questions? Thank you. Sir?
Okay, good morning. So again, Cliff Lange with South Texas Electric Co-op. I've met many of you already. So I just wanted to point out that I will be opposing against both SB6 and SJR, the SJR in this regard. So this is the only one that I will be opposing today. But to Senator Schwartner's point, this really is, your heart's in the right place on this particular issue. That being said, we're here to support this, but really want to point out that there are some problems with this as it pertains to cost and so forth. And so first of all, our role as a co-op is really to make sure that our 290,000 members receive reliable power and affordable power in that regard. And so we're constantly looking at that. I'm looking at that with my board to make sure that we are meeting the needs of our members, that we are doing so in such a way. And over the course of the last 20 years, where we've had a deregulated market, in essence, where we've gotten a wholesale market that really relies upon people being competitively offered into the market. And mind you, the STEC is competing in that wholesale market as well. We are looking always at the opportunity to make sure that we're providing a backstop and a reliable backstop to our members. We've done that. You saw our performance during Winter Storm Uri. That backstop paid off well. And so the idea of a backstop is not anything new. It really is beneficial to the market. But the problem with this is that this backstop will be sitting outside of the market. The problem is that it will be extremely, to Senator Menendez's point, it's going to be extremely important at some point in time, and to Emma's point, that we end up being able to use that to reduce overall cost to consumers. And at that point in time, that's where we start to see a breakdown in the market. And so when you start seeing those pressures to try to bring those generators into the market, we further suppress prices. We further put pressure on existing generators that are still in the competitive realm that may get pushed out of the market. And I think that's very important to understand. That being said, I do think that Senate Bill 7 and 12 probably will be the fixes that we need, and we could back away from Senate Bill 6. Thank you.
Senator?
Thank you. You mentioned cost to consumers twice, but you didn't give us specifics. Do you have any idea what this would cost consumers per month or per year?
So all I can go off of is what was stated before, which is the $2 to $3 a month, potentially $10.8 billion. Those are numbers that are, probably roughly in the ballpark. I don't have any way of specifically validating those. But that being said, it is going to be more expensive. And to the extent that you create a market where you don't have competitive generation opting to be built, and that's our concern, that you start flushing those generators out of the market, you potentially raise prices on that side as well. So the cost isn't just the cost of this insurance program, but it's potentially the damage that can be done to the competitive market as well, and thereby raising costs there. I want to believe that people are going to want to come into the market and continue to build. I do. I really do. But I'm not so sure. Again, to Senator Menendez's point earlier, I think the temptation is going to be too great at some point in time to see these generators sitting out there and seeing that they're not operating, and it's going to be very tempting to want to pull them into the market. And at that point in time, when you pull them into the market at prices that are below the offer cap that exists in the market, at that point in time, we start seeing price distortions in the market and potentially flushing out additional competitive generation. So I think the costs, even though it may be $2 to $3, as has been stated here today, I think from the insurance perspective, I think there are other costs that we're not fully recognizing that'll ultimately be borne out. How to quantify those, I don't know, but I suspect they do exist.
But y'all had a better experience during Uri, I think because you were much better run, but I'm in the Brazos area, which had a terrible experience and went now in bankruptcy. And in that competitive market, now my folks are all paying 20 and 30% more for their electricity. I mean, it's not the same everywhere, I guess is what I'm saying.
No, I agree. I agree.
That's
It's
a
not the same
dramatic
everywhere.
failure on the competitive market.
Understand completely. So, and I mean, it's all about choices ultimately, and what choices were made, and what choices, and to be honest with you, location, availability gas in some locations was a little bit more constrained than in others. But that being said, this type of program will have backup fuel. I mean, and that's great because that would help in a Uri style event. I mean, that type of generation is probably what you would want in that type of event. And I'm a proponent of backup fuel. We've got backup fuel. We operated on backup fuel during Uri, and that was very important and very important to making sure that we met the needs of our members and were successful as a result.
A couple of questions. You're clear that co-ops could participate in the reliability program, right? The insurance program.
In the insurance program, so based on the currently drafted form, I don't believe there's any co-ops large enough in Texas to be able to participate. So
Because of 10,000 megawatt.
the 10,000 megawatts, yes, that's right.
We'll look
the
at that.
financial threshold.
Reliability and resiliency I've said at the very beginning, has costs. We want affordability, we want reliability, we want our cake and to eat it too, right? So, energy efficiency has costs. The PCM has costs. The question is, what absolutely guarantees new generation that is there when we, as a state, need it to secure our grid and to make sure it's properly functioning. And this is the only plan, as was said, that absolutely guarantees new megawatts by type of generation. If Texas needs it, we should certainly, as a state policy body, consider building it for the future of Texas families and businesses. So this is, again, one bill in conjunction with the other bills, as you mentioned, 7, 12, there's a bunch of other ones that transmission tie-in, firming, that will hopefully incent the DRS, more dispatchable generation, and rebalance the scales that allow for more entry into the competitive market. At the same time, we have this on the outside and as a backup system to secure and give confidence to the people of Texas.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You run the South Texas Electric
South Texas Electric Co-op, that's correct.
If I recall correctly, right after Winter Storm Uri, when we had the 25 hours of hearings on the 2 separate days, you came in and testified. If I recall correctly, none of your customers lost power. Is that?
No. So even though we built a backstop for our members, we still had to endure load shed just as everyone else in ERCOT did. And so, in essence, we forfeited that backstop that we had paid for the benefit of all Texans in that regard.
Because ERCOT asked you to shed load.
That's correct.
But you had it if you needed it. I mean, y'all had already weatherized, if I recall correctly, ahead of time.
We did. We weatherized. We had procured fuel on an advanced basis, brought in additional fuel oil for our resources and so forth. So we had started our preparations about 2 weeks in advance of the storm.
So if other generators had prepared the way you had, possibly we would not have had the same situation. So while we talk about the fact that the market, it's not so much, in my opinion, not so much a market problem as a management problem.
So I think it would have helped for sure to have had additional weatherization in place at that point in time. And I think the efforts that the legislature made in Senate Bill 3 and that the commission has made since that point in time to weatherize the system has helped tremendously. Now, we still had gas issues, and so I don't know that we would have abated that just based on electric management of those resources or whatever. We still had that other side of the equation that still needed to be worked out. And I think Senate Bill 3 made some
Yeah.
progress in that regard.
If you remember correctly, some of the compression stations for the natural gas pipelines, they weren't on the do not cut lines, and so they didn't have electricity to get the compression for the natural gas, so we couldn't deliver the fuel to the generator. So there were lots of mistakes that Winter Storm Uri that had been addressed, and so it was a lot of things have been addressed, and my concern, and I think what you've addressed, and see if this is your concern, sometimes in government, because in our desire to send the clear message back home to all the constituents, we fix this. We might overcorrect.
That's correct.
And in our overcorrection, someone pays the price.
No.
And I think just like when you're sliding on ice in your car, you don't yank the wheel. And so I think we need to be very thoughtful, careful, deliberate in our approach, because at the end of the day, $10.8 billion, which with this bill, based on the testimony from a witness that potentially would build this, that is going to be on the backs of our ratepayers. And so I think we have to be very careful not to yank the wheel in our desire to do the right thing. And I think I appreciate your concerns because I agree with you. The chairman's heart's in the right place. Like everybody here, we want reliability, but we got to make sure that we don't overcorrect.
Let me go to Senator Campbell first, then Johnson.
Mine's more just probably an affirming comment that we all think. But with Winter Storm Uri, there were a lot of operational problems, failures that we're still trying to address. I think the Railroad Commission, the inspection, the weatherization that the Railroad Commission was responsible for was a big part of it, because if you can't get the fuel to the generators, then that's the biggest one. I mean, you have to get the fuel there. I think the enhancements that have been made from 3, the first phase, from last session, are a good start. And what we're looking at now is just trying to enhance just a backup to our backup. But it was just a comment, not really a question addressed to anybody. Thank you. But I guess I don't want us to get lost in the fact that there were multiple problems, and the Railroad Commission has to really make sure that what they do in weatherization, their part is done. Because like Menendez said, and Johnson has said, and you have said, it wasn't all one problem. And we're not shooting, we may have one target, which is to fix the problems that we experience, but we've got a lot of ways to get to that target. So thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Lang, you mentioned distortions in price signals and price formation, which is a complex subject. How quickly and clearly can you explain it to us lay people?
Absolutely. So I think if we manage these assets in the same way that we manage other reliability tools.
Can you be a little closer to the microphone,
I'm
please?
sorry. So if we manage these assets in the same means that we manage other reliability tools in our COT, we have a tendency to put those resources at the end of the offer stack so that when they're deployed, they will not displace other generation. In other words, we will deploy them when the prices are at $5,000 a megawatt hour. Now, that in and of itself doesn't necessarily create an immediate distortion in the market. So to Emma's point a little bit ago, the concern is that you're going to be paying for these resources. They're going to be sitting there. It's going to be extremely tempting when we come back in 2 years or 4 years to want to make sure that the commission uses these a little bit more frequently. And I'm not trying to say that that's the direction you're going to go, but I think you're going to get pressure to try to make sure that those are deployed at a lower price level. And if you do, at that point in time, those resources potentially start displacing competitive resources in the market. And when you do that, you start to see that price distortion at that point in time. You start to see more pressure on the existing portfolio of assets. And as a result, you potentially start flushing out more dispatchable generation, because we're doing this all in the backdrop, and we haven't talked about it too much today. We've got the IRA out there. And so I fully expect that we will see, I mean, if you look at the ERCOT interconnection queue, we will see a big onslaught of additional renewables, a bigger slug than we've already seen. And they're good. They're good for lowering costs. But at the same time, there is a cost impact. There is an impact to reliability because we start pushing out more dispatchable resources because they're not making the money to get back their G&A, to get back their O&M costs, to get back their their capital costs and so forth. So it is a very, very slippery slope, and I just want to make sure everyone's aware of that.
And just to clarify, even though you're not in the competitive retail market because you're cooperative, you are in the competitive wholesale market.
That's correct, absolutely. We do have one member, the only member that was referenced earlier, that is in the competitive retail market, but STEC in and of itself does operate in the competitive wholesale market.
Okay, thank you. Members? Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and the members. My name's Bill McCollum. I'm the CEO of the Franklin L. Haney Company, and I'm testifying on Senate Bill 6 and the JR on behalf of the company. I've spent 48 years in the electric business, including C-suite positions with Duke Energy and the Tennessee Valley Authority. We fully support the goal of ensuring Texans have enough dispatchable electrical generation to meet the needs of the growing state. We believe in competition and free markets, and we believe with a few changes we can strengthen Senate Bill 6 to accomplish the goals. First, as been discussed before, we believe any reserve program should not impact market pricing, and that can be accomplished by restricting the emergency dispatch to only those situations where resources have already either been deployed or proven unavailable. Second, we believe procurement and payment processes could ensure more qualified bidders. Right now, the bidders is too restricted, as has been testified to before. There's greater transparency and cost predictability can be achieved by allowing bidders to either bid on a portion or the whole package. We all want to see steel on the ground as soon as possible, but a 14-day application period is simply too short for 20-year assets. Having bidders compete for the lowest cost system using a system of stream of payment or credits will provide a better value to Texans. And then finally, we believe a mix of technologies, gas technologies, is needed. Simple cycle units are quick to start, can alleviate voltage fluctuations and allow black start recovery, but combined cycle plants can help with intermediate length needs after a natural disaster, and we recommend you consider a 60-40 mix of those types of assets. We appreciate the opportunity to work with you to deliver fail-safe reliability to the Texas electric market, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for coming. I appreciate it. How would you change the RFP process regarding opening up to a larger group of potential?
Well, it needs to be opened up even larger. The proposed, and we're still writing up comments to the version that dropped late last night or early today. But the requirement for the A credit rating, the requirement for the market cap, those are too high and are going to screen out a lot of worthy competitors.
We did change from 14 days to 60. I don't know that you think that's too short still, but yeah. And this is, as you were saying, the storage on the market. Everything's already called up when these assets would be called upon. You know, they'd all be, anything that's available would be operating. So the distortion is not, unless obviously, theoretically, it'd be changed by the legislature as to when it would be allowed to come online. So.
And Senator, some of the concerns that have been discussed already this morning about making sure they stay on the sidelines. You know, those assets can be separately metered, monitored by ERCOT, and they can guarantee that the assets only come on when they're called on and they don't substitute for another asset.
Tell me a little bit about the rate of return versus fixed payment stream.
So the way it's structured right now, it's a rate of return adjusted annually based on cost and so forth. And we believe a competitive model that could work well for Texas and offer a lower cost to consumers would be to base the bidding on a fixed stream of payments for the term of the insurance program as opposed to an adjustable rate of return model.
Thank you, members.
Senator Nichols.
I was curious on your comment here, and I think you also stated the way it's written up in the qualification reduces the number of bidders that can participate. That's 10 gigs. I mean, that's a lot.
Well,
If you broke it down to smaller, like 2 groups of 5, or even smaller to like 5 groups of 2.
Yeah, so we believe you should be able to bid on a portion or the entire program, or both. You know, here's a bid for the entire program, but here's a bid for a portion of it.
That's what we envision here. That's what we're trying to get to. And not one person taking all. It's
And we would, we'd suggest you set some kind of threshold. I don't think you want the problem of managing 10,000 participants who each have 1 megawatt, but, set some sort of lower threshold.
The PUC and the development of the RFP will delineate, the siting and the regions and the assets and the megawatts, and then that would be open to, if they just wanted to participate in that one region, they could do so, like NRG down in the southeast area of Texas, for instance, or yourself all over, I guess. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for clarifying that. I thought one company would be selected.
No.
So it could be multiple.
It would be based upon the RFP developed by the PUC, which would be regionalized, based upon the needs of the state.
Thank you for helping to clarify that. Good witness. In your written testimony, sir, you say that the introduced bill is unclear about whether the reserve resources might be dispatched in a way that would impact market pricing. How would you fix that?
That comment is related to what's been mentioned before about the allowance for hours during testing during the year. What I'm familiar with in other areas, and I think would work well here for Texas, is there should be a requirement for the resources to pre-schedule testing with ERCOT at times of the year that it's not going to impact the market and push other generation out of the queue. And I think that can be arranged with year-ahead scheduling processes through ERCOT.
And you also mentioned a 60-40 mix of generation. What would be the advantages of that particular mix?
Well, again, you have the fast start simple cycle turbines that are very good to be able to come up and respond to short-term voltage fluctuations. But when you have an issue like Winter Storm Uri, you can have a fleet of simple cycle turbines, and in theory, you can get enough backup gas. Although those are not very efficient, you can get enough gas supply on the ground to cover a certain period of time. We believe it'd be better value long-term for the state of Texas to have a mix, so you have those more efficient units. If you have a longer duration outage, you're going to use much less gas and be able to run at a higher efficiency level to supply the load.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Do you recommend that all of those have black start capability?
Yes. Well, we recommend every site have black start capability. So you might have a combined cycle plant and 4 simple cycle turbines co-located side by side. And if you had the simple cycle turbines all with black start capability, then they can bootstrap the combined cycle and get it going.
Got it. Good.
Members? Thank you, Pam.
Appreciate it very much. Thank y'all.
Chair calls, is this the last?
Yes.
All right, great. Katie Coleman, Shane Johnson, Kenneth Flippin. And this is our last panel. If there's going to be anyone else that wants to testify, they need to sign up, but you're not necessarily encouraged to. Just saying. Ms. Coleman, why don't you go first?
Thank you, Chairman Schwertner, Vice Chairman King, and members of the committee. Katie Coleman for the Texas Association of Manufacturers, and we are on the bill. I think you all have heard our position on this before, and we've had the same position going back to, I think, the 2012 timeframe on this set of issues. We don't believe that this type of tool is necessarily needed, and our preference would be to allow the market to work. We do believe that there are strong incentives being sent today for new generation, including with your leadership, hopefully the implementation of the ancillary service that targets new dispatchable generation that we would like to see implemented. And so we really would prefer in-market solutions. We do share some concerns about the risk of introducing, as an insurance policy, a state-procured, essentially, suite of resources. That being said, As compared to the filed bill, there has been a tremendous amount of improvement. And I know personally how hard your staff has been working on this, and it is much appreciated. The filed bill, I think, was based on some of the things filed last session and was fairly biased against ratepayer interests. A lot of work has been done to try to make those issues better. Our recommendation on this type of tool would be that if it's something that the state wants, to have it be a springing tool, so that if the commission or ERCOT identifies a capacity need that the market is not meeting, that then this type of procurement could be undertaken instead of mandating that it be undertaken now. And I think to that regard, we would prefer for this to be permissive instead of a requirement. If it is going to be a requirement, I think we would prefer to start with a smaller procurement initially, maybe 5,000 instead of 10,000. But I will say that from the consumer standpoint, as compared to some of the proposals like a capacity construct or continuing to shift the ORDC or these various other government interventions in the market, which this is an intervention, those are interventions, this at least guarantees that we get something in return from the consumer standpoint. Vice Chairman King, to your question earlier, this gives customers certainty that if they're paying more, they're going to get something. And I think that has been missing from a lot of the proposals that we've seen. Right now, there's every incentive for the existing generators to claim how unreliable the system is. And that's something that we've heard every few years, because typically the response to that is to increase prices. And this, especially as a permissive procurement, would give the state a tool to say, if you don't build it, we will. And we think that there's some benefit to that from the consumer standpoint. Thank you.
Members, any questions? No. Thank you. Sir? Please state your name and who you represent, and if you're testifying on, for, or against Senate Bill 6 or SJR 1.
All right, thank you. Hello, Shane Johnson. I am just speaking for myself as an individual. So first, I want to directly respond to a comment made earlier.
Testifying for?
Oh, sorry, against the SB and the SJR.
Okay.
Chairman Senator Shortner, you said earlier that the question, something along the lines of the question is, how do we guarantee more generation? But that is not the question that we should be asking. It is, how do we achieve reliability? And I think I've seen from most of the senators up here a dangerous conflation of the two. More generation does not inherently mean more reliability. But more importantly, more generation may be the most expensive and most harmful way to go about increasing reliability, when we have much simpler, more cost-effective means through energy efficiency and demand response that we should be pursuing. I've spoken to and heard stories from people around the state, some individuals in Austin, Brownsville, Houston, Cleveland, Texas, which is not Ohio, who've all talked about their electric bills going up significantly from securitization, actions that you all took last session, and people just can't afford another bill increase. And I don't know where the number of $2 to $3 a month came from, but that certainly doesn't seem like it could be accurate, or at least not the full picture of the costs on individuals. And I'll finish off by saying that an energy expert, many of y'all know, Doug Lewin, has stated before that if we had just a very modest increase in our energy efficiency goal of 1%, then the blackouts from Winter Storm Uri could have been halved just by a small increase in an energy efficiency goal. And that's going to potentially help lower individuals' bills who are already in crisis. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Thank you, sir. And you're not last because you're least, you're just last because it came up that way. So,
well, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Senators. I'm Ken Flippin. I'm with the U.S. Green Building Council Texas chapter, and I'm testifying on the SB and the SJR. I'll try to be as brief as possible. First off, we're on the bill because we do see positive aspects to it. Socialized insurance is one of the best ways to basically ensure reliability. If we do have an extreme event again, the most important priority is that we don't have loss of life again by having long days. And so that aspect, we feel like it is that reliability is an important aspect that would probably be achieved. Secondly, that insurance hedge can also reduce cost. We know that some of the most extreme costs that people paid was right there at that moment between when Uri was going on. Those same things could be hedged. Those costs could be hedged. You're paying insurance for it just like anything else, but that could be hedged if we do have an extreme event. Our concerns is how costly is the approach? How much is it going to take this approach? And then our second concern is focusing on one source. We think that our basic suggestion would be that the dispatchable source should be agnostic, like it shouldn't matter. As long as it's dispatchable, whether it's storage, whether it's geothermal, whether it's gas, we think the bill should be basically neutral. And then overall, our suggestion is we do need to focus more on the supply, on the demand side instead of just the supply side. There's a lot of gains to be made. We know that from reports that have been done in the past, something I'd be more than glad to share with y'all, that we could take basically 10,000 watts off of our grid during the peak winter time if we spend about $5 billion on energy efficiency and demand response. And so we encourage y'all to look at those alternatives as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Thank you very much, panel. Is there anyone else who wishes to testify on, for, or against SB 6 or SJR 1? Seeing none, public testimony is now closed. And
yeah, thank you. Again, as I said at the beginning, this is a work in progress. This is not a partisan bill. This is a bill for Texas, and we need everybody coming forward with ideas. Not everybody's going to like every aspect of this bill or the suite of bills we're putting forward, but I believe we can come to a consensus that is right for Texas by the end of this legislative session. So look forward to getting further input based upon the committee substitute for the stakeholders and members on the dais and other senators as we fashion the Senate's response, and then looking forward to working with my colleagues in the House. Thank you.
All right.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator.
And one of the things that we heard from several witnesses was the importance of energy efficiency, and I would hope we could work on an amendment toward that to ensure that.
That would be a good bill. Probably not this bill, but there are other bills that are being put forth. I think Senator Menendez has a bill to that effect. And so it's certainly important to address both the demand and supply side.
You don't see it in this bill at all?
No, I don't.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Well, with that, Senate Bill 6 and SJR 1 are left pending. The chair lays out Senate Bill 7 and recognizes the author, Senator Schwartner, to explain the bill. And you want to pull up the committee substitute as well for discussion?
Yes, and we can adopt this one? Don't adopt it, though.
We adopted, will be up for discussion.
Thank you, members. Again, this has a committee substitute, and I hope the audience and stakeholders have had a chance to briefly look at it. But as we all heard, reliability, dependability does come at a cost. And for too long, that cost has not been shared equally between intermittent and firm generation. Senate Bill 7 tries to bring balance to the market by making sure everyone is equally contributing to reliability through instituting a firming requirement in a non-discriminatory manner between dispatchable, non-dispatchable, and load-serving entities on a cost causation basis. The bill secondarily improves market signals, another portion of the bill, by the addition of a new ancillary service, the Dispatchable Reliability Reserve Service, DRRS, which targets dollars directly at dispatchable generation that can stay on for a sustained amount of time during peak demand. Specifically, the first part, the firming reliability requirement, creates a calculation that ERCOT can use to determine the level of reliability for dispatchable and non-dispatchable generators. ERCOT can then direct the least reliable generators to procure dispatchable resources to enhance their reliability and address any imbalance. The program, the requirement, firming reliability requirement, also creates a calculation for load-serving entities to determine the volatility of each LSE, the load of each LSE at peak hours. ERCOT can then assign costs to the most volatile LSEs, which encourage load-serving entities to use more energy efficiency and demand response programs to reduce that volatility. Going on to the second portion of the bill, the DRRS. The DRRS directs ERCOT to determine the quantity of services necessary to achieve their targeted reliability standard or goal. This determination will be based on historical variations in generation availability, including renewable intermittency and forced outage rates for each season. The bill finally directs ERCOT to then determine eligible resources that have a runtime of at least 4 hours and are available within 2 hours after deployment and have the dispatchable flexibility to address inter-hour operational challenges. Moving on to the substitute, after feedback from a whole host of stakeholders, the substitute ties the PCM guardrail protections to the firming calculation in this bill. The substitute also removes the number of hours in firming and makes calculations twice a year instead of once a year, and lets PUC determine how many peak hours should be used instead of giving a specific number. The substitute clarifies the firming calculation language after further input from stakeholders. Fourth, the substitute increases the amount of time a generator must run to participate in DRS from 4 to 10 hours. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions of the bill.
Members? Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Schwartner, do we have a definition in statute of net load variability? Because I'm just kind of curious, what exactly does it commonly mean? Are you trying to say demand minus renewable output equals net load? Because
You're referring to the reliability?
Yes.
The firming commitment?
Yes.
On the part of LSEs?
Yes.
Yeah, what line is that? We can, the precise calculation parameters, we have certainly some very good witnesses that can give us specific reasons of why these calculations are utilized like this, but I suggest we maybe bring them up.
Sure. So then, in this legislation, I mean, right now, it appears, and I think when you talk about the variability, you're saying that the renewables have to pay and their customers, right?
All entities, dispatchable, non-dispatchable, and load, will have a obligation to firm up to improve their reliability. So this goes to both on the generation side, the least reliable, and on the load serving side, the most volatile.
Right. So then I would hope that through your bill, we assign cost not in proportion to their contribution to net load variability, but in proportion to their contribution to outages or scarcity conditions. That's the question then would be, how did we arrive at a 10 hours of run time of 10 hours and 2-hour availability after deployment?
Great. Well, there was an initial bill with 2 hours on and 2 hours start and 4 hours run. There was discussion about how to maybe improve that in the sense of having a longer running time would be advantageous for the overall resiliency and reliability, and so that was changed to 10 hours. That's a number that can be further discussed during this proceeding. I'll actually look forward to hearing comments about it.
Very good. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. On that very subject of moving it from 4 hours to 10 hours, is this bill intended to address resource adequacy or operational flexibility?
Longer term, I think it addresses both. When you have a requirement for reliability, in firming, you certainly are going to increase dispatchable generation, and having more dispatchable generation will improve operational flexibility, and I believe also improve resource adequacy long term. I envision this bill as a slowly moving ocean liner that slowly changes the overall market structure based upon its requirements to become more reliable on the part of generation and less volatile on the part of load.
Are we cutting out certain technologies when we move from 4 to 10, specifically batteries, which are on the rise here in Texas? And when we take it to 10, they're out, right?
If it's 4 to 10, it would diminish the capacity of current generation batteries to participate unless they do some interesting technology regarding arrays and things like that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Great. Chair calls Corey Amthor, Todd Staples, Julia Harvey, Michelle Richmond. And again, please try real hard to stop talking when the red light comes on. And Chairman, what time are you going to want to try to break?
15 till.
Okay. So we are, just for everybody's scheduling, we're going to try to break at 15 till, and then the chair will let us know what time he expects us to come back after adjournment. So, Michelle?
Thank you. Michelle Richmond, Executive Director, Texas Competitive Power Advocates. We are opposed to Senate Bill 7, but we have constructive suggestions, and we'll be providing you some additional feedback as well. We appreciate the changes that recognize the need to address RUCs. That was definitely an improvement. We are not opposed to an ancillary service to address operational flexibility, but DRRS is not a substitute for PCM because it's not a resource adequacy solution. It just gives ERCOT another flexibility tool to deal with day-to-day operational issues. The proposed ancillary service could be a component, but it doesn't address sustainable reliability in the market, and no day-ahead or real-time product will actually do that, or quite candidly should do that. ERCOT and the PUC use ancillary services to address ERCOT's operational needs, not resource adequacy. The changes regarding PCM guardrails have some things that are concerning. Rather than prohibiting self-arrangement, we would recommend that you do a requirement that the market be centrally cleared through ERCOT so that a rep is buying credits and a generator is offering credits, but not to or from any specific entity. If there was an ERCOT administered bilateral trade in addition to that centrally cleared market, we would recommend reporting of those trades to ERCOT and in turn to the IMM so that promotes transparency and market monitoring. That design would address the concerns about self-dealing and would also ensure full visibility and transparency for the IMM to monitor for any market abuse and to take action if that's suspected. We appreciate the recognition that a date certain to have a specified amount of generation isn't workable, especially if there's a requirement that the program be implemented on a single day. And I'll be happy to answer questions.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Senator?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Should different allocation methodologies be used for different types of ancillary services?
I would suspect that we would look to ERCOT for that and how best to do that, but likely so, depending on what the purpose of the ancillary service is and what the needs are in the market.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Todd?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, Senators. My name is Todd Staples, President of the Texas Oil and Gas Association. Appreciate the opportunity to testify for you today. Out of respect for your time, we've turned in cards on most of the other bills so that we're not redundant in testimony, but we do want to say we are very grateful to the thoughtful, deliberative approach the Senate is taking to address our electricity needs as a state. We look forward to continue working with you to help refine these ideas, and we're very appreciative of that. I am testifying on Senate Bill 7 today because I wanted to clarify the different aspects that we're focusing on. We are supportive of the dispatchable reliability reserve service, and we're neutral on the firming. Firming is not an area that we have focused on extensively. We're going to be looking at the legislation, and we'll be offering comments later on. We are supporting the new reliability service because we believe it will provide targeted revenue to the specific type of generation that we know ERCOT needs in order to manage its reserve mix. We think this is an extremely important component. Targeting revenue in this manner will not only incentivize new generation, but it will mitigate the need to employ the technique of rucking that and we believe when that's mitigated, that consumers will benefit and that costs will be passed along to consumers. We do want to evaluate the impact on cost on the length of the duration of the availability from the 4 hours to the 10 hours. May be a great idea. We just want to look at, see what that does to overall cost. But we're something we're not opposed to. Importantly, we believe that the implementation of this new product will, to some extent, alleviate the need for the PCM, or even state procurement could be alleviated if this is implemented in the right way, and that you target the revenues and you get this new product to give you the reliability that you're looking for and that consumers are looking for, and that also increases capacity. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, members.
Kind of, yes.
Yes.
What an
Yeah,
answer I
kind
gave,
of,
kind of.
Kind of, Senator.
Right. Well, Todd, we're looking at we're really not addressing much in these bills regarding responsibilities that the Railroad Commission, I know you don't speak for the Railroad Commission, but again, they handle the oil and gas. Do you see anything being done proactive from them? I feel they carried a big responsibility in what happened with Uri and the lack of generation. But are you aware of anything they're doing proactively to also contribute to the reliability of the whole system and their responsibility they have to the state?
Senator Campbell, the Railroad Commission has been very active in promulgating new rules that would enable them to inspect and follow the guidance that this committee and this legislature gave them in implementing Senate Bill 3, the critical load designation being one very specifically. They have reviews.
Let me just shorten it real quick because we don't have much time. We instructed them. We gave instructions. But my question is, do you see anything they're doing independently, proactively, to help answer the questions to the problem that we had, other than the direction we gave?
Well, yes, they are. I mean, they're very thoughtfully going through this and exploring it. But I think it'd be a great omission not to remind everyone that ERCOT's own data indicated that the lack of natural gas production only contributed about 12 to 15% of the overall issues in regard to Uri, and that the vast majority was power generation unit outages. I mean, those are the facts.
And
that gas will, with the power kept on, is a much greater reliability factor in that designation of critical load issue.
Well, I just wanted to see if we know of anything the Railroad Commission is doing proactively to help. Yes, I realize that ERCOT, what they said about that. But anyway, I'm not going to belabor it.
I have specifics that they are doing outside the bounds of Senate Bill 3 that I'll share with you.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Ms. Hart.
Good morning. Thank you, Chairman Schwertner, Vice Chair King, members. My name is Julia Harvey on behalf of Texas Electric Cooperatives, and I'm testifying on Senate Bill 7. I'm on the bill because we know there's ongoing conversations to refine some of the concepts and the calculations and metrics used to define cost allocation, and we haven't had an opportunity to really review the substitute in detail. We want to keep working on it, but the framework does address some of the operational challenges we face in ERCOT, and the intent is to assign the resulting costs in line with cost causation. So at a high level, supply and demand both contribute to the need for the system operator to procure services and products to maintain reliability. So that's around load forecast error, thermal outages, and renewable variability. And so consequently, under the conceptual framework in Senate Bill 7, supply and demand are both assigned a share of the cost for the products. And on the supply side, the intent is that's done on a technology-neutral, non-discriminatory basis. So the goal of assigning costs in that manner is to incentivize all classes to minimize those costs through improved performance on the supply side, conservation on the load side. But we want to keep working on this issue. On the new dispatchable reliability reserve service for uncertainty, regarding resource qualification, it may be beneficial to look at even more robust qualifications for service in terms of runtime. So if the goal is at all to address extreme cold, which we know can last for several days, a 4-hour or even a 10-hour runtime might not be sufficient. And we also wanted to make it more explicit that the service is used to alleviate the use use of out-of-market actions like reliability unit commitment, and I believe that is addressed in the substitute. So with that, thank you. I'm happy to answer questions.
Senator Johnson.
Ms. Harvey, are you testifying regarding firming requirements for or against, or maybe they can be made to work? I didn't get it from your testimony.
Thank you, Senator Johnson. As of now, we're testifying on the cost allocation concept and wanting to keep working on it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for offering some specifics.
Yeah.
Sir?
Thank you. My name is Corey Ampther, president of Enchanted Rock, Houston-based microgrid owner, developer, operator, with over 280 microgrids in operation throughout Texas, providing 600 megawatts of dispatchable capacity. Enchanted Rock appreciates the opportunity to testify on Senate Bill 7. We appreciate Senator Schwartner's and Senator King's leadership on SB 7 to propose dispatchable reliability service designed to drive targeted investment in additional dispatchable generation resources. Should the program move forward, we would like to raise to your attention a significant barrier to the success of the proposed DRRS, the exclusion of distributed energy resources, or DERs. As proven by Enchanted Rock's strong performance during Winter Storm Uri and Elliott, distributed resources are an essential part of the solution when it comes to ensuring more reliable and resilient electric service to Texans. Enchanted Rock's dual-purpose microgrids not only provide long-duration backup power to customers during grid outages, but also run to provide necessary dispatchable energy back to the grid when our customers are on grid power. Current ERCOT market rules prohibit participation in ancillary services due to what they call being on a non-curtailable circuit. If you're on a non-curtailable circuit, you're not allowed to participate in ancillary services. And basically, no TDSPs will guarantee that any circuit is non-curtailable. So basically, the only way to participate in ancillary services is to build a separate circuit directly to the substation from any microgrid, which is, basically very cost prohibitive to do that when you're looking at small resources like that. And so we think that's unfair. That we've made progress on that. They're now allowing non-spin to participate, but we'd like to see more ancillary services be allowed to participate, and we think we could use your help in getting that done. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, any questions?
Can we bring up Mr. Vegas?
Absolutely.
And also IMM?
Okay. Thank you, the panel. We're going to ask the IMN and then Mr. Vegas with ERCOT to come up as well. Independent Market Monitor, do we have? Who do we have? Carrie? Great.
Morning.
Good morning.
We were talking right before the hearing regarding the institution timeline regarding a firming requirement and obviously DRS, just an ancillary service. Can you just lay out for what you believe ERCOT could do in kind of devising this, getting stakeholder input? First, I guess address the DRS since it's just another ancillary service, and then we'll go to the firming requirement, reliability requirement.
Okay. My name is Pablo Vegas, President and CEO of ERCOT. So for the development of a new ancillary service, typically what we've seen is somewhere in the range of 3 years to develop a new ancillary service. We've recently gone through the development of the new ERCOT Contingency Reserve Service that's going to go live this summer. That took about a little over 3 years to do. It's a fairly extensive process that goes into changes in the market management systems, the grid management systems, and so when you open up those systems in order to develop a new product, it takes a pretty considerable amount of time. So it's about 3 years to develop an ancillary service. And then on the firming, developing a firming type solution, I think we need to do a little bit more work on understanding that. I talked after our conversation this morning with a couple of our folks that are in the settlements area and the operations area. They believe that there would probably need to be some changes in our settlement systems as well as in the market management systems, both. And so if we get into both sets of systems, it's going to add a little bit of time in order to develop a product that can do that. So I think it would be safer to say, we're probably in a broader range of
18 to 36 months, probably maybe around a couple years, maybe somewhere in the middle there might be a good guesstimate at this point, but it'd be helpful for us to be able to spend a little more time evaluating how a firming product could work and at what extent those systems would need to be changed in order to give you a good estimate on that. Feel better on the ancillary service because we have experience developing those recently. A firming service type of a concept is going to be something unique and new for us, so I want to make sure we get that right.
Can you give us that definition of net load variability that Senator Menendez was bringing up? Do you happen to have that top of your head?
Could you repeat the question?
Sure.
Speak into the mic.
Net load variability, the definition of it.
I don't think we have one in statute. That's what I was curious. How do you define net load variability? Do you have that? Because, my thoughts are, would it be demand minus renewable? Would that equal net load? I'm trying to figure this.
Yeah, I'd need to follow up on that as well, Senator. I don't have a good, clear answer for you on that right now.
The other aspect of going back to the firming / reliability requirement, this is a novel concept. It has not been instituted in any state or nation, is my understanding, correct?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Right. So it would be a significant movement forward as far as trying to again make everybody own up to their need to be more reliable / firm. So it's an interesting, I think, concept that I think is worthy, obviously, of Senate Bill 7, but it's one that we're trying to get, again, the definitions precise as much as possible to where we can give the clearest direction to ERCOT and have, I believe, our timeline here is the end of next year, right? With trying to get this in place regarding at least the initial rulemaking, right? End of next year, I believe, is what we have in the bill. But anyway.
Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Sorry.
That's okay. I was just wondering, as we're talking about ancillary services, if you could help me on these ancillary services cost provisions. I don't think it defines dispatchable resources. So if that's the case, then I'm assuming batteries or demand response or future geothermal resources could qualify as a dispatchable resource. Is this something that how do you see it? How do you read that?
Yeah, I would agree. I don't think that there's anything that would necessarily prevent those types of technologies, if they have the ability to meet the performance requirements as laid out in the statute, to participate as an ancillary service.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman?
Let's go with Senator Johnson, then Senator Zaffarani.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Vegas, on this firming requirement, it seems a little bit like an upside-down capacity market in that we're not paying people to have power we're not using. We're penalizing people for not having power that we might use. Is that a fair assessment?
It's kind of if a capacity market offers a carrot to generators by giving them revenue for having a certain amount of capacity available, a firming requirement would be a stick that would essentially tax resources that don't meet a certain level of performance or a certain level of capacity. And so there's a potential risk when you employ a stick into an economic model, then resources that are close to a economic edge could be pushed over that edge as a result of having to bear an additional cost. And because as it's contemplated in the statute, I think the firming requirement that it applies to intermittent, dispatchable, and load equally, it could have that effect on any type of resource that is close to an economic edge if it has to bear another cost burden that it may not be able to do so economically and therefore would pull out of the market.
So this could be older wind farms, it could be older steam plants.
It could, yes. It could create an energy kind of valley at the outset until the longer term intent of it comes into play.
What do you mean an energy valley?
An energy meaning we would lose energy resources in the short term. So resources that cannot be economic under the new cost burden that's put in place would pull out of the market. So we would have an energy deficit from that until we would see the longer term effects of energy of new supply being built based on the revenues created from the firming costs.
Right, and if there are additional costs imposed, I'm not sure from your testimony whether we're saying that the generators are going to bear that cost, or whether it's going to ultimately be passed on to consumers anyway.
Effectively, in the energy market, all of the costs flow down to consumers. And so if there's a higher cost imposed on intermittence, as an example, and they have to firm up to a certain level, they will change their bidding tactics in order to incorporate that variable cost. That would then raise the cost of the energy market, and everybody pays for that.
I see, especially when someone exits. You have greater scarcity and therefore higher prices and therefore higher consumer costs.
That would be a follow-on market action that could raise prices as well. But just adding any cost into the energy market directly, it has to get paid for by somebody. And so generators pass all of their variable cost into the market. They bid that in. And so the market then would then pass that down to the consumers who pay for the energy.
So firming requirements are essentially introducing, I don't want to say a tax, I don't want to use those tactics, but a cost. Is that the most efficient way for us to get new dispatchable generation, or should we just send that cost straight to new generation?
I don't think it's the most efficient way to incentivize dispatchable generation. I think some of the other ideas that have been proposed, and the PCM is one that we've talked a lot about, it's very focused on generating or passing the revenues directly to those resources that are performing during scarce periods on the grid. And so I think that's a more efficient way to move dollars from where they're going to be paid from to where they're going to, go to the resources, versus having a general kind of a tax that some of it will end up in the energy market and flow its way down. Some of it will go to generators that will provide the firming service, but I don't think it's as efficient a way as what's being contemplated in other models that are out there, like PCM.
So in the firming, you've got this diffusion of dollars turning into pennies going a lot of different places, whereas in the PCM, we're directly requiring load-serving entities to make sure that there's power available to their customers.
I think that's correct. And there's another very important point, I think, around what's being talked about, and that is all of this is around trying to make the system more reliable. And so the one of the underlying principles in PCM is that at the end.
Go ahead. I'm going to ask one question.
You bet. One of the underlying principles is that load-serving entities will carry an obligation to meet the energy needs of their customers. That doesn't exist today. That's a new concept. A firming requirement doesn't create that obligation for load-serving entities to meet the energy needs of their customers. So that's a very principled change that would enhance and force a reliability model inside of the market. And so that, coupled with getting then the dollars directly to those types of resources to meet the reliability standard, is, I think, a combination that's a very effective and reliable combination.
I hope everyone could hear that through the annoying buzzing.
Just let me ask one question, Ms. Bivens. Both of these proposals, both the DRS, ancillary services, in market, and then the firming/reliability requirement on all dispatchable, non-dispatchable, and load, would you consider that also an in-market change, market change?
This is Carrie Bivens with Potomac Economics. Would I consider them both market changes?
In market, not out of market.
Out of market.
In particular, the firming requirement.
Yeah.
Give you that.
I admit I'm still trying to wrap my head around the concept of the firming requirement versus some of the language that's in the bill. It appears to be more of a cost allocation formula than it is a requirement to do anything. If it's a requirement to do something, to proactively go out and purchase backup generation, that has a lot of the same issues as the load serving obligation proposal. You know, that it's in the bilateral market. We can't monitor for market power abuse and things like that. But certainly it's a requirement to participate in the market, so I don't.
You don't see a problem with it?
I don't think it's out of market.
Right. Yeah, firming's a cost allocation methodology to then implement whatever requirement that we envision should occur, right? And the costs associated with that.
And I know y'all will be around the rest of the day.
Right.
That's
Okay.
correct.
Right.
Mr. Chairman, should I hold my questions for them until we come back?
That'd be best, I think.
Thank you.
So is there anyone else wish to testify on, for, or against SB 7?
Yes.
Do you want? Give me 1 second. Chairman, do you want to just leave?
We're going
pick
to
this back
recess
up?
until right after 4.
All right, so, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to recess until right after we recess on the floor, 15 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll pick back up SB 7.